Chapter 346. Mo Huaisho was like a night elf as she sped through misty Chi City. What was even stranger was that she would transform into a different person every time she passed by a place. One moment she was a young girl, the next moment she was a young man. If one looked closely, they would realize that she relied on the mask on her face to change her appearance. Soon, Mo Huaisho left Misty Chi City without being noticed by all the guards. The reason she came to Misty Chi City was to investigate Jill's collection of iron essence and meet Lung Shichi at the same time. She wanted to meet this person who single-handedly destroyed the profound Yang sect and ruined Zhu Lugu's plan. Who would have thought that her probing would actually expose her own identity? But in that situation, if she didn't use her gu arts, she would definitely be injured. This was also because Lung Shichi and Qin Jinshan's abilities were far beyond her expectations. How would she have thought that two people in the spiritual pulse realm would have such powerful abilities? What she needed to do now was to leave the Western Desolate Province before the news spread. Otherwise, once the news of her identity spread, it would be very difficult to leave the Thunderflame dynasty. But when she passed through the forest several kilometers away from Misty Chi City, she saw red, blue, and yellow lights suddenly blossoming in the sky. A figure walked out of the lights. Mo Huaisho's figure stopped abruptly. Her eyes focused. This person was wearing a large black cloak and a mask on his face. There was chaos on the mask. She knew that this person was coming for her, and he didn't come with good intentions. This person was naturally Lung Shichi, who was wearing his own mask. He activated the Fate skill and locked onto Mo Huaisho's aura and figure, directly teleporting over. Mo Huaisho saw that Lung Shichi's cultivation was only in the spiritual pulse realm, so she took the initiative to attack. Her hands moved quickly, and purple poisonous gas rose. Lung Shichi's white eyes under his mask could clearly see that this wasn't poisonous gas. This was clearly a combination of countless tiny goo worms. If he accidentally inhaled some, the consequences would be unimaginable. He grasped the air in his hand, and a rank 4 spirit sword appeared. Suddenly, hundreds of sword chi surged out like the birth of the sun, sweeping in all directions. The scorching sword chi instantly broke through 80% of the poison gas. This was the rank 4 spiritual skill, Shaoyang's sword chi. Mo Huaisho was secretly bewildered, but Lung Shichi pointed with his left hand. With a boom, a blood-red lightning shot out. That blood-colored thunderbolt was actually a perfect fusion of the rich blood chi and the tyrannical power of lightning. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. Mo Huaisho was shocked. She shook the bell on her wrist. Instantly, dozens of goo worms of different colors came out of her body and rushed towards the blood-colored lightning. Among these goo worms were the spirit-devouring goo that Lung Shichi had seen before. In an instant, the blood-red lightning shattered most of the goo worms, but it was blocked by the goo worms in the end. The remaining goo worms continued to fly towards Lung Shichi. He used his palm as a blade and slashed down. A blazing flame blade slashed out and swallowed the goo worms. At this moment, Lung Shichi changed his voice and said, Mo Huaisho, I have no ill intentions. I'm just here to make a deal with you. Mo Huaisho's movements paused. She and Lung Shichi had only exchanged 2 or 3 moves, and she felt that Lung Shichi was very difficult to deal with. Furthermore, she saw that Lung Shichi didn't even use his full strength, but he was still able to fight her to a standstill. This already gave him the right to talk to her as an equal. However, Mo Huaisho couldn't help but feel embarrassed and angry. Tonight, she had met Qin Jinshan, Lu Xingji, and this mysterious person in front of her. They were all existences that could fight against Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators while being in the Spirit Pulse Realm. She couldn't help but sigh. The Thunderblaze dynasty was indeed full of talents. On the other hand, her Zhu Lu country was always lacking in talents. She didn't connect Lu Xingji with Lung Shichi because in the Dark Thunder Manor, Lung Shichi used the Glorious Sun Mysterious Yang Palm, which was a metal elemental technique. However, Lung Shiqi was currently using a fire elemental technique. The two were completely different, so Mo Huisho didn't think that these two people could be the same person. Mo Huisho's thoughts turned rapidly. She didn't have the confidence to kill Lung Shiqi. If she really fought to the death, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. This place was only a few miles away from Misty Chi City, and she was definitely on the Dark Thunder Guard's blacklist. Once someone found her here, she would probably never be able to return. Mo Huisho lowered her voice and said, "Tell me." The corner of Lung Shiqi's mouth lifted slightly under his mask. He had already guessed that Mo Huisho would be like this. He said, "Mo Huisho, now that your identity has been exposed, you should know that the Dark Thunder Guards have a sound transmission array. If there are no accidents, your information should have already spread throughout the entire West Desolate Province. Take advantage of the fact that the Dark Thunder Guards and the various city guards haven't been mobilized yet. This is your last chance to escape from the West Desolate Province. Therefore, with every moment you stay here, your chances of survival will decrease." Mo Huisho knew that Lung Shiqi was not lying, but it still made her feel uncertain. She thought to herself, "My identity was only exposed not long ago. How did he know? Could it be that he's a member of the Dark Thunder Guards? Or was he hiding near the Dark Thunder residence just now?" However, she didn't have much time to think carefully, so she said even more anxiously, "Then why are you still talking nonsense?" Lung Shiqi laughed secretly. Mo Huisho's state of mind was no longer calm. As long as her state of mind was unstable, she would reveal her flaws. In fact, what he said just now was all a lie. It was true that the Dark Thunder Guards had a sound transmission array, but he didn't expose this matter. He wanted to trick Mo Huisho and gain more benefits. Lung Shiqi put on an unfathomable expression and said, "I can pretend that I didn't see you, and even help you cover up the news and let you leave the West Desolate Province smoothly. Don't doubt my words. My identity is far from what you can imagine. If I say I can do it, then I can do it." Mo Huisho naturally didn't believe everything in her heart, but Lung Shiqi's words did move her a little. She gritted her teeth and said, "Then what do you want?" "Cultivation techniques." Lung Shiqi said these two words. "I'm very interested in your goo techniques. As long as you give me a few rank 4 cultivation techniques related to goo techniques, I can guarantee that you can leave the West Desolate Province." Lung Shiqi's words weren't a lie. He was really interested in goo techniques. Moreover, he had already opened up all the spirit veins that could be opened up, and he urgently needed cultivation techniques to open up the remaining spirit veins. Therefore, he set his sights on Mo Huisho. Mo Huisho chuckled when she heard this. "So you've taken a fancy to my cultivation techniques. Not to mention that cultivation techniques are secrets that can't be passed on. I might as well tell you the truth. My cultivation techniques require the use of goo worms. Unfortunately, only Zhu Luwa knows how to cultivate goo worms. So even if I give you the cultivation techniques, you won't be able to cultivate them." Lung Shiqi shook his head. "You don't have to worry about this. You can take your time to think about it. If you drag on for too long, even I won't be able to suppress your information." Chapter 347. Mo Huisho was furious, but she couldn't do anything. Lung Shiqi had her in a tight grip. She couldn't kill Lung Shiqi in a short period of time. She could ignore Lung Shiqi and escape, but Lung Shiqi wouldn't let her escape so easily. Moreover, just like what Lung Shiqi said, her information had already spread throughout the Western Desolate Province. The longer she delayed, the stricter the defense at the border would be. Even the city guards and dark lightning guards of each city would be looking for her. By then, she wouldn't be able to escape even if she had wings. However, the cultivation technique she cultivated was a secret technique of the Goo God sect. It couldn't be spread to outsiders. If this matter was spread, she would be taken away by the sect leader to refine goo. Thousands of thoughts flashed through her mind. Finally, she decided to give it a try. Escape. Mo Huisho's body flashed with green light. Her figure turned into a green light and flew across the night sky. Lung Shiqi snorted coldly as a silver white cloak suddenly appeared behind him. Using the ghostly spring steps, he transformed into a black and white stream of light and shot out. His speed was slightly faster than Huaisho's. The ghostly spring steps was a combination of 3 movement techniques. In terms of rank, it was at least comparable to a 5th-level technique. Coupled with the Holy Silver Deer's Beast Origin Battle Rune, his speed was slightly faster than Huaisho, who was at the Spirit Aperture Realm. Huaisho naturally saw Lung Shiqi chasing after her. She sighed in her heart and stopped. She knew that if Lung Shiqi attacked, he would definitely be able to hold her here. Her plan to escape would be completely ruined. At the same time, she was secretly surprised. The person in front of her was only at the Spirit Pulse Realm, but his battle strength was comparable to the Spirit Aperture Realm. Even his speed was so terrifying. This person's identity must not be simple. She began to doubt Lung Shiqi's words. Huaisho, you still haven't given up? My patience is limited, and so is your time. I don't have time to waste with you. I will only give you 3 breaths of time to consider. After 3 breaths of time, if you do not agree to give me the cultivation method, I will turn around and leave. I will then wait for the news of your execution. Lung Shiqi's voice was as cold as a 1,000-year-old ice cave. Huaisho had never met such a difficult person. Although her cultivation was high, she was not confident that she could kill Lung Shiqi in a short period of time. Even if she ran away, her speed was not as fast as Lung Shiqi. She would still be trapped here. Her only choice now was to make a deal. Huaisho couldn't help but feel a little anxious. However, she recalled what Lung Shiqi had said before. She rolled her eyes and said, I promise you. However, she suddenly changed the topic. However, how can I trust you? Lung Shiqi said coldly, you are still wasting time. If you don't trust me, we can go our separate ways. Huaisho was obviously not satisfied with such an answer. Her eyes hidden under the mask kept flickering as if she was hesitating whether to trust Lung Shiqi or not. Finally, she made up her mind and said, Good. You are very good. I will give you the cultivation method. Then, Huaisho took out a few handkerchiefs. She quickly wrote dense and delicate words on them and threw them to Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi took the handkerchiefs, and a system prompt appeared in front of his eyes. Discovered Level 4 Cultivation Method 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique. Incomplete. Do you want to learn it? No. Seeing this prompt, Lung Shiqi knew that the cultivation method was not fake. However, this cultivation method was incomplete, which made him unhappy. He said in a low voice, This cultivation method is not complete. Huaisho laughed. You said it yourself that you only want a Level 4 cultivation method. My cultivation method is far beyond Level 4. Even if I only gave you the first 2 levels, it is comparable to a Level 4 cultivation method. Now that I have given you the cultivation method, you won't go back on your words, right? Huaisho thought to herself. Although this 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique was forbidden to be spread, she only gave out the first 2 levels. Moreover, this cultivation method could only be practiced with Gu worms. Even if she gave it to him, he would not be able to practice it. Lung Shiqi laughed secretly. Huaisho actually caught the small loophole in his words. He also retorted, That is true, but I'm talking about a few Level 4 cultivation methods. If you only gave me the incomplete cultivation method, this one is not enough. Don't be greedy. Huaisho was also angered by his words. Lung Shiqi said sarcastically, You even gave me this kind of legacy cultivation method, or some ordinary Level 4 cultivation methods worth. I am purely curious about the cultivation method system of the 6 nations of the West and want to learn by analogy. As long as you give me 2 more Level 4 cultivation methods, I will immediately arrange them for you. Huaisho immediately said in a low voice, You think Level 4 cultivation methods are vegetables by the roadside? Lung Shiqi shrugged. If you really can't, Level 4 spiritual techniques are barely enough. And Huaisho heard this and thought of something. She took out the square handkerchief and started writing again. This action was a tacit approval of her choice. However, Lung Shiqi was very curious. How many handkerchiefs did this Imo Huaisho bring with her? Take them. Imo Huaisho threw a few handkerchiefs in annoyance. Discovered level 4 spiritual technique, Imperial Gu demonic sound. Do you want to learn it? Discovered level 4 spiritual technique, Gu spirit spiderweb. Do you want to learn it? Lung Shiqi fell into silence after receiving these two spiritual techniques. Humph. Imo Huaisho sneered inwardly. These two spiritual techniques were genuine level 4 spiritual techniques, but ordinary spirit cultivators couldn't cultivate them at all. Imperial Gu demonic sound was a spiritual technique that could control a large number of Gu worms. However, this Thunderfire dynasty didn't even have any Gu worms, so how could she control them? As for Gu spirit spiderweb, it was the spiritual technique she used to stop Lung Shiqi from chasing after her in Dark Thunder Manor. Although this spiritual technique didn't rely on Gu worms, it required one to cultivate 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique to use it. In her opinion, it was impossible for Lung Shiqi to cultivate the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique, so this Gu spirit spiderweb was also a useless spiritual technique. Thinking of this, Imo Huaisho proudly raised her head. Actually, the reason why Lung Shiqi was silent was because he really wanted these two spiritual techniques. Although the Imperial Gu demonic sound couldn't be used now, he would be going to Zhu Lu country soon. At that time, he could think of ways to get some Gu worms and use them. On the other hand, the Spirit Venom Spiderweb was a spiritual technique with a strong binding ability that Lung Shiqi currently lacked. He had personally experienced how difficult it was to deal with this spiritual technique. It could be said that he was very satisfied with these two spiritual techniques. However, he still pretended to be sullen and said angrily, "You really know how to take advantage of loopholes. Fine, I'll accept this small loss. You can leave now. I can help you fight for half a day at most. As for the rest of the day, you can count on yourself." After speaking, a black aura rose around him, and his figure disappeared under the cover of the black aura. Chapter 348. When Imo Huaisho saw Lung Shiqi leave so straightforwardly, she was also slightly surprised. It seems that this person is somewhat trustworthy, but I don't know if he has the ability to buy time for me. If it's true, half a day is enough. Then, Imo Huaisho thought of Lung Shiqi's deflated look before he left. She was secretly happy and left at her fastest speed. As for Lung Shiqi, he quietly returned to his room and called Qiucheng over. Qiucheng was still sending people to clean up the devastated courtyard. Now that he was suddenly called over by Lung Shiqi, his head was full of question marks. "Sir, what orders do you have?" Lung Shiqi lightly said, "Don't spread the news that Imo Huaisho is from Zhu Road country. Wait until tomorrow morning to inform the headquarters of Shihuang province." Yes, Qiucheng knew that this was somewhat against the rules. Since Imo Huaisho's identity was exposed, they should quickly spread the news throughout Shihuang province and capture her before she returned to Zhu Road country. But since Lung Shiqi said so, he must have his reasons. Qiucheng could only obey. Go. Lung Shiqi waved his hand. Qiucheng bowed and retreated. Lung Shiqi's lips curled up slightly. Tonight, he had earned a rank 4 cultivation technique and 2 rank 4 spiritual skills for free. It could be said that his harvest was not small. As for why he let Imo Huaisho go, it was naturally because there was a use for her. After some time, he would be going to Zhu Road country. This was a rare opportunity, so he planned to use this opportunity to get more Gu worms. Although Gu techniques were a small path, they were unpredictable and hard to guard against. If used well, they could be a trump card. For example, the mind-controlling Gu could secretly control a person's thoughts. Another example was the spirit-devouring Gu, which could devour spirit energy and was the nemesis of various spiritual skills. Thus, Gu techniques could not be underestimated. However, Lung Shiqi was going to Zhu Road country as a Dark Thunder Guard, so he probably did not have many opportunities to come into contact with Gu worms. And the reason he let Emo Huaisho go back was to use her as a channel to collect goo worms. Lung Shiqi had already memorized Emo Huaisho's spiritual aura. As long as Emo Huaisho appeared near him, he would immediately recognize him. That Emo Huaisho's cultivation was at the spirit aperture realm. Lung Shiqi believed that there were not many women who had reached the spirit aperture realm in Zhulu country. He only needed to ask around to find out Emo Huaisho's true identity. At that time, he only needed to use the excuse of Emo Huaisho secretly imparting a cultivation technique to restrain Emo Huaisho and make her get some goo worms. Then, everything would become simple. Therefore, he chose to release Emo Huaisho. He was treating Emo Huaisho like a leak. It was laughable that Emo Huaisho had thought that he could use a few techniques and spiritual techniques that others could not cultivate to fool Lung Shiqi. Little did she know that Lung Shiqi had started to plot against her the moment she took out the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. Then, Lung Shiqi took out the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, Imperial Goo Demonic Sound, and Goo Spirit Spiderweb to cultivate. What surprised him was that the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique could be considered a very obscure cultivation technique. Out of the 9 spirit veins that it needed to open, only one was already opened by Lung Shiqi. In other words, Lung Shiqi could now open another 8 spirit veins. This made him feel that tonight's plan was too profitable. On the second day, the news that the Dark Thunder Manor's supervisory seal was not lost spread throughout Lanchi City. This made those who came to watch the show a little disappointed. Of course, what they wanted to see the most was Dark Thunder Manor being defeated. However, this also showed how unfathomable Dark Thunder Manor was. Even a great bandit like Emo Huaisho was defeated by Dark Thunder Manor. It could be seen that Dark Thunder Manor was a scourge. In addition, there would be no harm if there was no comparison. Everyone's topic of discussion shifted to the comparison between the City Lord's Manor and Dark Thunder Manor. Look at the City Lord's Manor. There were hundreds of city guards and a city lord who was in the late stage of the Spirit Aperture realm, but it was still stolen. On the other hand, Dark Thunder Manor only had a few dozen Dark Thunder guards, and none of them were in the Spirit Aperture realm. Even so, Emo Huaisho was not able to succeed. Under such a comparison, Dark Thunder Manor's reputation seemed to have overshadowed the City Lord's Manor. Sun Gang's expression was unsightly, but he didn't care too much about this. He was more concerned about Emo Huaisho's identity. Early in the morning, he received information from Lung Shiqi that Emo Huaisho was a spy from Zhulu country. A spy from Zhulu country actually entered his City Lord's Manor, as if there was no one there. This was simply a disgrace. It was his dereliction of duty. Catching spies was the Dark Thunder Guard's job, but this spy committed crimes in Lanchi City, which was under Sun Gang's jurisdiction. This was his responsibility. Although the higher-ups didn't blame him, Sun Gang's heart still felt stifled. At the same time, he really wanted to know how Lung Shiqi found out about Emo Huaisho's identity. As for the Lung Shiqi that these people were talking about, he didn't care about the outside world and only cared about his own cultivation. On the path of cultivation, he couldn't relax at all. Because he had already opened up 42 spirit veins previously, he had a lot of experience. Thus, this time, he only used 5 days to open up the additional 8 spirit veins of the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. At this point, he already had 50 spirit veins on him. Just in this aspect, no one could compare to him. But his goal was to open up all 72 spirit veins in his body. Unfortunately, he didn't have any extra rank 4 cultivation techniques on hand, so he had to think of a way to get some rank 4 cultivation techniques. Actually, he also had an expectation in his heart, and that was, why hadn't his reward arrived yet? He had uprooted the Xianyang sect along with a few other clans. The reward for such a great contribution should be very generous, and there might even be a cultivation technique inside. But counting the time, more than a month had passed, and there was still no news from the higher-ups. Not only was there no news about the reward, but there was also no news about the matter of going to Zhu Road country. Since they were going to Zhu Road country to ask for an explanation, shouldn't they take advantage of the fact that the matter had just happened to save them? Of course, these were all problems that the higher-ups were considering. He couldn't care less even if he wanted to. Since the reward didn't arrive, he could only turn his attention to other people. What he needed the most now was a rank 4 cultivation technique, but rank 4 cultivation techniques were exceptionally precious. Also, there were requirements for the rank 4 cultivation technique that he wanted. That was, the spirit veins that needed to be opened up in the cultivation technique couldn't be the same as the ones that he had already opened. Lung Shiqi had already opened up 50 spirit veins. If he didn't want it to be the same, the requirements for the cultivation technique were extremely strict, especially since there were still many spirit veins in his legs that hadn't been opened up. So what he needed the most was a cultivation technique that was good at speed. Lung Shiqi's eyes flickered, and he suddenly thought of someone. After a while, he called a dark lightning guard and ordered, "Go and call the Zhong clan's clan head Zhong Cheng over." He prepared to harvest leeks again. Chapter 349. Zhong Cheng was brought to Dark Thunder Manor. Along the way, his heart was jumping up and down. He couldn't guess why Lung Shiqi called him here, and he didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. He also knew about Mo Huaishou's failure in Dark Thunder Manor. Even a Spirit Aperture Realm bandit was defeated by Lung Shiqi. It could be seen that his methods were getting more and more powerful. Zhong Cheng walked into the meeting hall and saw Lung Shiqi sitting on the main seat. He quickly bowed and said, "Greetings to Lord Supervisor." It could be said that he lowered his status to the lowest. "Sit," Lung Shiqi said indifferently. The reason he called Zhong Cheng here was naturally because he was interested in the Zhong family's cultivation technique. The patriarchs of the 6 great families in Mist-Chi City were all at the Spirit Pulse realm. Without a cultivation technique of rank 4 or above, it was impossible for them to cultivate to this realm. Therefore, Lung Shiqi planned to obtain the cultivation techniques of the 6 great families. The cultivation techniques of the 6 great families might not be that profound, but Lung Shiqi didn't care about how powerful the cultivation technique was, but how many spirit pulses it could open. And the Zhong family's cultivation technique was one that specialized in speed. This wasn't a secret, and the Dark Thunder Guard's information was very clear. Zhong Cheng sat down anxiously. When he first saw Lung Shiqi, he was keenly aware that something bad was going to happen today. Therefore, he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. However, he still smiled and said, "Lord Liu, if there's anything, just tell me." Lung Shiqi smiled. "Today I called Patriarch Zhong here to discuss the Tao of spirit cultivation." Discuss the Tao of spirit cultivation? Zhong Cheng was confused. What was this about? Seeing Zhong Cheng's confused expression, Lung Shiqi knocked on the chair and said, "I heard that Patriarch Zhong's light feather gale record is quite mysterious. Those who successfully cultivate it will be as fast as the wind and as light as a feather. I wonder if that's true?" When he heard Lung Shiqi mention his family's cultivation method, Zhong Cheng's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling about this. He secretly swallowed his saliva and laughed dryly. Really, if that's the case, then it's easy." Lung Shiqi suddenly clapped his hands. At this time, Qin Jinshan expressionlessly walked in with his sword. Qin Jinshan's injuries were mostly healed after a few days of recuperation. He glared at Zhong Cheng the moment he walked in. Qin Jinshan was the Blood Cloak assassin of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Many people had died in his hands. Being stared at like this, Zhong Cheng suddenly felt a chill coming from his tailbone and going up his spine, making him shudder. He could even sense that this person could kill him with a single strike of the sword. Zhong Cheng trembled and said, My lord, what do you mean? I have never done anything to let you down." Lung Shiqi said indifferently, "Oh, it's nothing. It's just that this envoy wants to see the Zhong family's light feather storm record. Coincidentally, this envoy's subordinate, Dark Lightning Envoy Qin Jinshan, is also proficient in speed. You can compare notes with him." Hearing Lung Shiqi's words, with Zhong Cheng's shrewdness, he immediately knew what Lung Shiqi wanted. He actually wanted the light feather storm record. Zhongcheng's heart was filled with bewilderment. This cultivation method was the foundation of their Zhong family. He absolutely could not casually leak it out. However, he couldn't help but have some doubts. In his opinion, Lung Shiqi's cultivation was improving at a rapid pace. Furthermore, his battle strength was also very strong. He was able to kill someone at the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm when he was at the middle stage of the Spirit Pulse realm. At the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm, he was actually able to stall the Spirit Aperture realm Li Feizhou. Such a person definitely had a very high-level cultivation method. How could he possibly be interested in the light feather storm record of his family? Zhong Cheng was bewildered, but he quickly understood that Lung Shiqi didn't call him over to discuss this matter with him. If he didn't agree, he probably wouldn't be able to walk out of this door. Zhong Cheng made his decision in a breath's time. He stood up and said, "Why is Lord Lu so troublesome? Why don't I offer the light feather storm record?" Lord Lu can slowly comprehend it. This isn't too good. Lung Shiqi's face showed some hesitation when he heard this. In reality, his evaluation of Zhong Cheng rose a bit. Although this person was greedy for life and afraid of death, he had a vision and decisiveness that ordinary people couldn't hope to reach. Zhong Cheng smiled and said, "Lord Lu is too polite. If it weren't for Lord Lu, how could the Zhong family have its current glory? Not to mention the light feather storm record. Even if it was the entire Zhong family, it would be worth it. Since the Zhong family head is so enthusiastic, I can't refuse. I'll accept this light feather storm record." Lung Shiqi revealed a smile on his face. "How about this? I'll make the decision. The Zhong family can send a spirit transformation realm cultivator to join the Dark Thunder Guard. However, this person must have some ability. My Dark Thunder Guard doesn't accept trash." This. Zhong Cheng was secretly shocked when he heard this. Join the Dark Thunder Guard? His Zhong family could join the Dark Thunder Guard. What did this mean? This meant that his Zhong family and the Dark Thunder Guard were one family. He could be considered to have completely boarded the Dark Thunder Guard's ship. Zhong Cheng felt that exchanging a cultivation method for the long-term development of the Zhong family was definitely worth it. He quickly bowed and said, "Many thanks for Lord Lu's kindness. Please rest assured that this little one will carefully select the family's disciples." Lung Shiqi waved his hand, and Qin Jinshan understood and retreated. Zhong Cheng took a pen and paper and wrote down the cultivation method of the light feather storm record. Rank 4 cultivation method light feather storm record discovered. Do you want to learn it? Seeing this prompt, Lung Shiqi gently smiled and said, "The Zhong family head is still sensible. By the way, I still have a few guests coming later. They're all people that the Zhong family head knows. You can meet them here." Zhong Cheng's eyelids twitched when he heard this. He immediately guessed who the other guests Lung Shiqi was talking about were. It must be the family heads of the other 5 families. It turned out that not only did Lung Shiqi want his Zhong family's cultivation method, but he also wanted the cultivation methods of the other 5 families. After this, the other 5 family heads came one after another. Under Lung Shiqi's coercion and Zhong Cheng's example, they had no choice but to hand over their family's cultivation methods. In the same way, Lung Shiqi also promised that they could send a disciple to join the Dark Thunder Guard, which was not a bad treatment. Overall, things went very smoothly. After he sent everyone away, Lung Shiqi immediately returned to his room to prepare to cultivate and open up his spiritual veins. To his surprise, the Zhong family's light feather storm record could open up an additional 6 spiritual veins. It was a pity that the other 5 cultivation methods were rather ordinary. These 5 cultivation methods only added up to 10 more spiritual veins. However, Lung Shiqi was very satisfied. As long as he opened up all the spiritual veins of the 6 cultivation methods, he would have 66 spiritual veins. Chapter 350. Not long after, Lung Shiqi had just opened the sixth spirit vein of the Light Feathergale record when he received a message from the Western Desolate Province headquarters asking him to make a trip there as soon as possible. The message mentioned that he was going to the Western Desolate Province for two things. One was that he had received his reward, and the other was that he was preparing to leave for Zhu Road country. Lung Shiqi didn't expect these two things to happen at the same time, but it was good. It saved him the trouble of making two trips. Then, he called the 5 dark lightning envoys to the conference hall. I'm going to the Western Desolate Province immediately, and then I'll follow Inspector Yu to Zhu Road country. I'm not sure when I'll return, so you guys will be in charge of Dark Lightning Manor for the time being. Lung Shiqi called them over to arrange everything. He said, Qiu Cheng, you'll still be in charge of intelligence, and Qiao Qian will continue to manage the Dark Lightning Guards. Qian Ming, you'll be in charge of handing over missions. As for Qin Jianshan, you just need to keep all the troublemakers under control. Qiu Cheng and Qiao Qian were still in their original positions, and Qian Ming was in charge of managing missions when he was disguised as Pang Yuan, so it was natural for him to do it. Qin Jianshan wasn't good at communicating with people, so he wasn't suited to manage Dark Lightning Manor. Of course, Lung Shiqi didn't transfer him from the Blood Garment Pavilion to manage things. Instead, he was interested in his battle strength. After Lung Shiqi left Mist City, it was unknown how long it would take for him to return, so it was inevitable that some troublemakers would come out to cause trouble. With Qin Jianshan here, he could leave without worry. Everyone nodded in agreement, but Qin Jianshan didn't say anything, but everyone was already used to it. At this time, Guan Feihong spoke, Sir, what about me? Among them, Lung Shiqi didn't mention Guan Feihong. He didn't want to fight for power, but he couldn't just sit around and bask in the sun every day. Lung Shiqi turned to look at him and said, You'll come with me to Zhu Road country. Yu Ruifeng had sent a message saying that he could bring a subordinate with him. The reason why he chose Guan Feihong was because Guan Feihong was at the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm and could be considered a decent fighter. Secondly, Lung Shiqi always felt that Guan Feihong seemed to know a lot about the Gu God sect. Taking him to Zhu Lu country might be able to collect the Gu worms more smoothly. Guan Feihong's eyes flashed as he lowered his head and said, Yes. As for Qiu Cheng, Qiao Qian, and the others, they all looked at him enviously. Being brought to Zhu Road by Lung Shiqi was not only a golden opportunity, but the trust they had in him was enough to make them envious. After arranging these matters, Lung Shiqi didn't delay any further. After simply packing up, he brought Guan Feihong to Western Desolation City. This time, because he was bringing people with him, he didn't use the fate skill to hasten his journey. He could only ride a spirit horse for 4 days before finally arriving at the Western Desolated City. But to Lung Shiqi's surprise, he bumped into Yu Ruifeng the moment he stepped into Dark Thunder Manor's headquarters. Yu Ruifeng seemed to have been waiting for Lung Shiqi. When he saw him arrive, he approached him with an anxious expression and said, Follow me first. Lung Shiqi indicated for Guan Feihong to wait here for a moment. He followed Yu Ruifeng to a side room with doubts in his heart. Yu Ruifeng said with a serious expression, Your reward has arrived, but you must be careful of the person who delivered it. Who is it? Lung Shiqi was surprised to see Yu Ruifeng so serious. This was the first time he saw Yu Ruifeng like this. Moreover, did they need someone to deliver the reward? Couldn't they just send someone else? From Yu Ruifeng's words, this person wasn't simple at all. Even a high-ranking inspector like him seemed to be wary of this person. Yu Ruifeng said, The person who came is Eunuch Gao, one of the Dark Thunder Manor's supervisors. He is also His Majesty's trusted aide. His short sentence immediately caused Lung Shiqi's pupils to shrink. Although he did not know much about Dynasty's internal affairs, especially what happened in the Supreme Palace, he had at least some common sense. This Eunuch Gao was one of His Majesty's most trusted people. He was also one of the 4 supervisors of the Dark Thunder Manor and was in charge of supervising the 8 western counties of the Thunderblaze dynasty. It could be said that this person was his direct superior. This was an important person who could reach the heavens. However, Eunuch Gao had always been by His Majesty's side. Why would he appear in the western desolate province? Unwavering continued. Eunuch Gao came here secretly. This matter cannot be revealed to anyone else. Otherwise, you and I won't be able to keep our heads. When you see Eunuch Gao later, put away all your thoughts. Whatever he says, you just have to agree. Do you understand? Lung Shiqi felt that Yu Ruifeng's words didn't just contain fear towards Eunuch Gao, but also a bit of fear. However, he thought about it again. As the saying goes, accompanying a ruler is like accompanying a tiger. Since Eunuch Gao was able to accompany His Majesty, he must be someone with profound means. Eunuch Gao has waited long enough. Quickly go to the main hall to see him. All right, don't mention anything about us. However, if Eunuch Gao asks, you must report truthfully. This subordinate understands. Lung Shiqi cupped his hands and left the side room. He turned towards the main hall. When he took a step into the main hall, he immediately felt that the room was filled with cold air. This kind of cold air wasn't ice cold, but cold. In his eyes, a beardless old man was sitting on a chair. He looked very old. The wrinkles on his face were like ravines, but his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. This was Eunuch Gao. Lung Shiqi knew that Eunuch Gao's cultivation was at the unity of heaven and man realm, the same as Yu Ruifeng. However, he had a faint feeling that if Eunuch Gao and Yu Ruifeng were to fight, Yu Ruifeng would probably be killed within a few moves. He had only felt this kind of invisible aura from Eunuch Gao from his master Wu Xiang. After Lung Shiqi entered, he only glanced at Eunuch Gao before lowering his head. He respectfully said, "This subordinate, Lu Xingji, greets Steward Gao. Sit." Eunuch Gao's voice sounded hoarse and sharp. It was very uncomfortable to listen to. Lung Shiqi originally wanted to be polite, but when he thought of Yu Ruifeng's instructions, he bowed again and sat down. Eunuch Gao's eyes swept over Lung Shiqi. His eyes became unusually bright. Heroes indeed come from the young. Lung Shiqi felt that Eunuch Gao's gaze was about to see through him. When he heard Eunuch Gao's words, he didn't know if Eunuch Gao was talking about the destruction of profound Yang sect or if Eunuch Gao had seen through him. He humbly said, "Steward Gao is overpraising this subordinate." Eunuch Gao expressionlessly said, "You used your spiritual pulse cultivation to destroy profound Yang sect and Zhu Lu country's conspiracy. You are worthy of such praise. I've also brought you the reward you deserve on this trip. There are 2 rewards in total. First, I have fought for a spot for you. A spot to represent the entire western desolate province in this event." Hearing this, Lung Shiqi was confused. Wasn't this just painting a pie in the sky? From Eunuch Gao's words, it seemed like a very rare spot. However, compared to a castle in the sky, Eunuch Gao preferred a real reward. However, he didn't show any expression on his face. Second, I can agree to one of your requests. Hearing this, Lung Shiqi's heart suddenly moved. Chapter 351. What did Lung Shiqi want the most? Of course, what he wanted the most was a cultivation method. Right now, he only lacked 6 spirit meridians to open up all the spirit meridians in his body. However, these 6 spirit meridians were very impractical, and almost no cultivation method would open them up. Therefore, he needed a very obscure cultivation method. Thinking of this, Lung Shiqi cautiously said, "Steward Gao, this humble servant wants a cultivation method of level 4 or above. It would be best if it was a very strange cultivation method." Hearing Lung Shiqi's request, Eunuch Gao revealed a look of interest. He stared at Lung Shiqi for a few breaths of time, then suddenly laughed. However, his laughter was abnormally unpleasant to the ears, and even a bit piercing, making people feel uncomfortable. "This request is rare, but you've asked the right person. I do have a strange cultivation method here, but I don't know if you dare to cultivate it." Eunuch Gao threw out a jade slip half the size of a palm. Lung Shiqi was a bit confused when he caught it. "Send your mental power into it." Lung Shiqi's mind moved, and his mental power surged into the jade slip. Then, he suddenly saw sinister words in his mind. Cold Nether Treasure Manual. This jade slip recorded a cultivation method, and it was a level 5 cultivation method. If a level 4 cultivation method was enough to support a large family, then a level 5 cultivation method was enough to support a spirit cultivation sect. Eunuch Gao was actually giving him a level 5 cultivation method. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. This cultivation method was personally created by me, and there has never been a successor. You're the first. Eunuch Gao's voice sounded, and Lung Shiqi withdrew his mental power. Hearing this, Lung Shiqi instantly thought of a famous cultivation method created by a eunuch in his previous life. Combined with what Eunuch Gao just said, he might not dare to cultivate it. Lung Shiqi suddenly felt a cold breeze under his chair. This cultivation method, could it be that only eunuchs could practice it? Eunuch Gao continued, "The cold nether scripture is a cultivation method that my family created for my children. Although you can cultivate it without cleansing your body, if you forcefully cultivate it, it will cause an imbalance in your yin and yang. Do you want this reward or not?" Eunuch Gao had already explained a lot for Lung Shiqi. Even if Lung Shiqi didn't want to, he didn't dare to say it out loud. He stood up and cupped his fists. "Thank you for your reward, Steward Gao." Eunuch Gao raised a sinister smile. "Good. When we reach Zhulu country, don't lose face from my imperial court." Lung Shiqi knew that Eunuch Gao was asking him to leave. He nodded and took 2 steps back before turning to leave. Eunuch Gao looked at Lung Shiqi's departing figure with a meaningful look in his eyes. When Lung Shiqi came out of the main hall, he saw Yu Ruifeng give him a look in the distance. He immediately walked over. "What did Eunuch Gao ask you?" Yu Ruifeng seemed to ask anxiously, but Lung Shiqi frowned inwardly. He answered, "Eunuch Gao didn't ask anything." "Really? How would this subordinate dare to deceive Lord Yu?" "Ha!" Yu Ruifeng raised his head and smiled. "How can I not believe Virtuous Nephew's words?" "Right, Virtuous Nephew. Can you tell me what reward Eunuch Gao gave you?" "Don't misunderstand. I'm just curious." Lung Shiqi sneered inwardly. This Yu Ruifeng probably wanted a share of the pie. But he had nothing to hide and wanted Yu Ruifeng to explain. So he said, "Eunuch Gao gave me a cultivation method and a spot, nothing else." At this point, Lung Shiqi deliberately lowered his voice. "Martial uncle, isn't this Eunuch Gao too stingy? He sent me away with a cultivation method." But when Yu Ruifeng heard the word spot, his eyes widened. He was a dignified inspector of the Western Wilderness Dark Thunder Guard, a person with real power. Yet he revealed such a shocked expression. Yu Ruifeng murmured, "Spot? Is it really that spot?" "Virtuous Nephew, what was Eunuch Gao's exact words?" When Lung Shiqi saw Yu Ruifeng making a fuss over nothing, he knew that the quota was extremely precious, so he repeated Eunuch Gao's words to him. Yu Ruifeng nodded. "It can't be wrong, it can't be wrong. Virtuous Nephew, you're really lucky. Eunuch Gao wants to nurture you greatly." But Lung Shiqi was still confused. "Martial uncle, what exactly is that spot? This matter hasn't been completely decided yet, so I can't reveal it to you. But you have to know that your spot is the only one in the entire Western Wilderness Dark Thunder Guard. You can imagine how precious this spot is. In my original plan, after returning from Zhulu, I was going to select some people to compete for this spot. But now that Eunuch Gao has spoken, it's yours. It saves me a lot of effort." Lung Shiqi understood half of it. This spot was obviously very rare. Now that he was directly appointed, it was a great reward. But unfortunately, he still didn't know what this spot was for. Since Yu Ruifeng didn't say, he couldn't ask. He could only wait patiently. And after Yu Ruifeng confirmed this matter, his words and actions towards Lung Shiqi became more enthusiastic. He pulled him a chat, as if they were really uncle and nephew. After a long time, Yu Ruifeng said, "Virtuous Nephew, it's getting late. You should go rest first. Tomorrow we'll prepare to leave for Zhulu." "Okay." Martial Nephew will take his leave. "Come, take Virtuous Nephew Lu to the East Courtyard." Yu Ruifeng immediately called out. The 2 servants immediately led Lung Shiqi away. At the same time, they were secretly surprised. The East Courtyard was a place where only distinguished guests could live. Generally speaking, Yu Ruifeng would only arrange for distinguished guests of similar status to him to live in the East Courtyard. After settling down in the East Courtyard, Lung Shiqi locked himself in his room and took out the jade slip that eunuch Gao had given him. Lung Shiqi did some calculations. In these few short days, he had actually collected as many as 8 fourth-tier and above cultivation techniques, and it even included a rank 5 cultivation method. In the past, Lung Shiqi definitely wouldn't have dared to think about this. This was the benefit of status and strength. It was no wonder that many people were obsessed with these things their whole life. However, Lung Shiqi didn't care very much. Next, he began to concentrate on cultivating the cold nether scripture and the 2 accompanying spiritual skills, cold nether palm and cold nether hand. These 2 spiritual skills were both rank 5 spiritual skills. What surprised him even more was that this cold nether scripture was indeed very different from ordinary cultivation methods. It just happened to be able to open up his remaining 6 spirit veins. This also meant that as long as he cultivated for a certain amount of time, he could open up all 72 spirit veins in his body. Chapter 352. After a night of hard work, Lung Shiqi finally opened up another spirit vein. The next morning, their delegation of more than 20 people set off for Zhulu country. Although they were called a delegation, they had neither the honor nor the equipment of a delegation. These people included Inspector Yu Ruifeng, Supervisor Yuan Song, who was in charge of the South County, and Lung Shiqi, as well as the accompanying guards. Even the weakest of the guards were at the spiritual pulse realm. There were several masters in the gang spirit realm. Lung Shiqi only brought Guan Fei home. Yuan Song brought 5 subordinates, and Yu Ruifeng brought more than a dozen people. And there was a very special person among these people. That was Jill. This witness had been kept by Lung Shiqi so that when they arrived at Zhulu country, he could testify in person. Because there weren't many of them, each of them rode on a spirit horse and rushed towards Zhulu country at top speed. There was only a grassland and a few military towns between the West Baron Prefecture and Zhulu country. There was no difficult road, so it only took them nearly 10 days to arrive at Zhulu country. As soon as they entered Zhulu country, Lung Shiqi not only saw many people dressed up in the West regions, but also saw various strange buildings that could not be seen in the imperial court. It was an eye-opener. There were no prefectures in Zhulu country because the entire Zhulu country was not as big as the West Baron Prefecture. So there were only dozens of cities in Zhulu country. Lung Shiqi and his group went straight into the imperial city of Zhulu country. At this moment, at the gate of the imperial city, the prince of Zhulu country, Prince Gus, received them. Prince Gus looked to be in his 40s or 50s. His body was a little weak, and he looked a bit like a scholar. Prince Gus said in an awkward accent, "Welcome, special envoys from your country. Please come with me to the post house to rest." On the way here, Yu Ruifeng had already given the information of the high level of Zhulu country to Lung Shiqi. Zhulu country was naturally led by its king, but internally it was divided into 2 major factions, the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction. The peacemaking faction was basically made up of the old officials of Zhulu country. They were led by the current state elders and state preceptor. The state preceptor was the leader of the Gu God sect, which was the state religion of Zhulu country. The other pro-war faction was led by 2 princes, and Prince Gus was one of them. Zhulu country, sending a prince to greet the envoy, was giving Yu Ruifeng enough face, but Yu Ruifeng kept a straight face and didn't give Prince Gus any face. He knew why they were here. They were here to denounce him. Moreover, the smuggling of refined iron was obviously for the sake of war, and it was most likely instigated by the pro-war Prince Gus. The group followed Prince Gus to the post house next to the palace. After Yu Ruifeng sent Prince Gus away, he immediately called Yuan Song and Lung Shiqi over. Yu Ruifeng said, "Tomorrow, come with me to see Zhulu country's king, Hideng. Remember, No one in Zhulu is worthy of our respect. So even if you see the king, you have to straighten your backs. This is the power of our Thunderfire dynasty. Lung Shiqi and Yuan Song nodded. Yu Ruifeng looked at Lung Shiqi and said, "Tomorrow, go to the palace with that Jill. Also, bring all the evidence on you. With the witnesses and evidence, they can't deny it. However, the two of you shouldn't speak unless absolutely necessary. After all, this is a negotiation between two countries. Any slip of the tongue will be magnified. This subordinate understands." Lung Shiqi cupped his hands and said, "Well, since we're already here, there's no harm in telling you some things." Yu Ruifeng's face became serious. "Although we say we're here to denounce them, you should know the dynasty's intentions. They won't tear apart all pretense of cordiality with Zhulu country. Therefore, we can only try to get as many benefits as possible. The more benefits we get, the more credit we will get. Also, we have another mission." Lung Shiqi's face showed a confused expression, but he already guessed it. Of course, a big shot like Eunuch Gao wouldn't appear in the Western Wilderness just to give him a reward. At most, it was on the way. The time he came to the Western Wilderness coincided with the time he went to Zhulu country. Lung Shiqi wouldn't believe that there wasn't a connection between the two. At that time, he guessed that this trip to Zhulu country wasn't as simple as denouncing them. Yu Ruifeng raised his hand and took out a piece of jade stone. He injected spiritual energy into it, and the jade stone suddenly released a layer of jade brilliance that enveloped the three of them. There should be some kind of restriction that isolated sound and spiritual energy. Even so, Yu Ruifeng lowered his voice and said carefully, "Zhulu country and profound Yang sect gathered a large amount of fine iron. It's very likely that it was ordered by the two pro-war princes. The higher-ups want us to secretly help the pro-peace faction suppress the pro-war faction." Lung Shiqi was secretly shocked. Was this to interfere with the internal affairs of another country? However, with just a few of them, could they do it? Yuan Song also frowned and asked, "Sir, we only have a total of 20 people. How can we interfere with the conflict between the two factions? If we knew this would happen, we should have brought more people." Yu Ruifeng shook his head. "If we bring too many people, it will arouse suspicion. Moreover, our goal is to suppress the pro-war faction, but not the two princes. We only need to use some methods to get rid of a few pro-war ministers and weaken their forces. The rest will be done by the pro-peace faction for us. But we just got here, and something happened to the pro-war ministers. Isn't this too obvious?" Yuan Song was still a little hesitant. However, Lung Shiqi found that Zhou Song was worrying too much. Perhaps this person had been the great supervisor for too long, so he had to be meticulous in everything he did and not leave any loopholes. He didn't know that even if the people of Zhulu country knew that they were the ones who did it, so what? As long as they did it cleanly and didn't leave any traces, whether it was the king or the two princes, they wouldn't be able to offend the Thunderfire dynasty. Moreover, the pro-peace faction might even raise their hands to support their actions. A trace of dissatisfaction flashed across Yu Ruifeng's eyes, but he still patiently explained it to Lung Shiqi, which was exactly what he had expected. Then, they discussed some details of the plan and went their separate ways. Lung Shiqi returned to his room with complicated feelings, since they wanted to interfere with the conflict between the factions of Zhulu country. Then his matter of collecting large numbers of goo worms wouldn't be so smooth. Thinking of goo worms, he thought of Emo Huaishou. Then he sat cross-legged on the bed, and his eyes suddenly turned green and white. With his current mental strength, Wai Tai's field of vision had already expanded to a range of 7 to 8 miles. He could already see half of the royal city. The reason why Lung Shiqi activated White Eye was firstly to check how many experts there were in the royal city. Secondly, he wanted to try his luck and see if he could find Emo Huaishou. However, what surprised Lung Shiqi was that he really found Emo Huaishou. However, Emo Huaishou was actually in the royal palace. Chapter 353. Lung Shiqi didn't expect to find Mo Huaisho so quickly, and she was actually in the palace. Is she a member of Zhu Lu country's royal family? He guessed, but this was also good. He originally planned to use Mo Huaisho to help him collect goo worms, so the earlier he found her, the better. Unfortunately, now wasn't the time to go out, so Lung Shiqi could only stay in the room and cultivate. The night passed quickly, and it was very peaceful. The next morning, Lung Shiqi sent Guan Fei Hong to gather information. But he didn't want to gather information about the main combat faction, but he wanted information about the Goo God sect and goo worms. This was his main purpose in coming to Zhu Lu country. As for holding accountable and interfering in Zhu Lu country's faction disputes, with Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Tsang around, there was no place for him to speak. Lung Shiqi walked out the door and was surprised to see a group of Zhu Lu country's people rushing in angrily, heading straight for Yu Ruifeng's room. He furrowed his brows and felt a little uneasy. Something important must have happened to make these people so angry. So, he followed them. Lung Shiqi had just gotten close to Yu Ruifeng's room when he heard angry shouts coming from inside, and a piece of news that shocked him. Zhu Lu country's king died mysteriously last night. In a moment, thousands of thoughts flashed through Lung Shiqi's mind. The king died? No matter how small Zhu Lu country was, it was still a country. How could the king suddenly die? And he died after they came here. So it looked like they were the ones who did it. And those people just now were some of Zhu Lu country's ministers. They thought it was Yu Ruifeng and the others who killed him. Lung Shiqi walked into the room and saw Yu Ruifeng's face as black as an iron pot, being pointed at and questioned by a few people. Now, they had come here specifically to question him. In the end, before they could even begin, they were questioned by someone else. Lung Shiqi looked at Yu Ruifeng and knew that he had a lot of anger in his heart. Yu Ruifeng was the inspector of the West Baron Prefecture, and the prefecture he oversaw was even bigger than the Zhu Road country. He came to Zhu Road country with a bit of arrogance. Now that he was being questioned by a group of officials from a small country, he would definitely be furious. But Yu Ruifeng didn't say anything. He just sat there with a sullen face. Lung Shiqi nodded. Yu Ruifeng was right. At this time, Yu Ruifeng absolutely couldn't say anything. They had all stayed in the post house last night. Many of them could testify to each other. It would only take a little investigation to find out. And once Yu Ruifeng got angry, he would be caught red-handed and wouldn't let go. At this moment, Yuan Tsang also rushed over. He chuckled and tried to smooth things over. Everyone, sirs, there's no need to be so emotional. We've only just found out about your country's king's passing, and our hearts are filled with grief. But this matter has nothing to do with us. We didn't even take a step out of the post house. You'll know once you check. The people of the Thunderflame dynasty are the most despicable. You just arrived at the king's city, and the king died mysteriously. Who else could it be other than you? Don't think that we don't know. You're all from the Dark Thunder Guards, and you're all spirit cultivators of the Sky Realm. It's not impossible to assassinate the king without anyone knowing. You dare to assassinate the king? Take them down. Yuan Tsang and Yu Ruifeng quickly exchanged glances. At this time, not only them, but even Lung Shiqi could see that these people were here to cause trouble. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that the reason why the Thunderflame dynasty sent Lung Shiqi and the Dark Lightning Guards and delayed for more than a month before coming to the Zhu Road country was to make both sides turn the matter into a small one. As long as Zhu Road country took out some benefits, everyone would treat it as if the transportation of iron didn't happen. Therefore, Lung Shiqi and the others would definitely not assassinate the king. They had no motive at all, and these officials of Zhu Road country were all people who could sit in high positions. How could they be fools? How could they not see it? Therefore, these people wanted to use the king's death to put the hat of a major suspect on the Dark Thunder Guards. This way, the Dark Thunder Guards could only focus on proving their innocence. How could they have the chance to question the Zhu Road country about collecting iron? To Yu Ruifeng, the king's death was completely unexpected and completely disrupted the plan they made last night. But thinking about it, now that the king was dead, the throne was empty. There was no need to think about what would happen next. Zhu Road country would definitely fall into internal strife for the throne. As long as Zhu Road country fell into chaos, they would no longer have any thoughts of harming the Thunderflame dynasty. This was a good thing. At this time, another person rushed in. It was Prince Gus. As soon as he walked in, he scolded the officials who were causing trouble. Impudent! Lord Yu is the special envoy of the Thunderflame dynasty. His status is noble, and even this king is far inferior to him. You actually dare to question Lord Yu. You are really reckless. Prince Gus, their appearance, and the king's death cannot be a coincidence. That's right. Even if they're the special envoys of the Thunderflame dynasty, we must investigate this matter thoroughly. So what if they are from the Thunderflame dynasty? They dare to assassinate the king. At most, we will fight them to the death. Enough! Prince Gus roared. A group of people who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Haven't you embarrassed yourselves enough? This king orders you to leave this place immediately. When they saw how angry Prince Gus was, they didn't dare to disobey the king's orders. They could only leave with righteous indignation while muttering. Prince Gus turned around and put on a warm smile. He said to Yu Ruifeng, Lord Yu, please forgive us. The cheating country's king suddenly passed away, and the officials were a little flustered. They should die 1,000 times for disturbing Lord Yu's rest. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. Yu Ruifeng also squeezed out a smile and said, Prince Gus, what are you saying? I am also very surprised and sad about the death of your king. It is understandable that the officials are a little agitated. Prince Gus heaved a sigh of relief and said, Oh, since that is the case, this king will thank Lord Yu on behalf of those officials for letting bygones be bygones. Now that the king has passed away, the Zhulu country is without a leader. Lord Yu's matter may be pushed back for a while. It is fine. I am afraid that your country has a lot of things to deal with now. We can just wait here. Yu Ruifeng's words were full of understanding. Lord Yu is really magnanimous. This king admires you. Speaking until here, he sighed again. Sigh. The palace is in a mess now. This king still has to go back and pacify the officials. I will not disturb Lord Yu's rest. Prince, please do as you wish. After Prince Gus left, Yu Ruifeng asked Lung Shiqi, who had been watching from his side, What do you think? Lung Shiqi said, One is playing the good cop, the other is playing the bad cop. Zhu SSS wills will not let's to say, they will s's will as Zhu Road's halls with Zhu Road country's stabilizing force. The reason why Zhu Road country was able to exist until now wasn't because of how wealthy its citizens were, nor was it because of how elite its army was. It was because there were several Sky Origin Stage experts in the hall. It was just that these Sky Origin Stage experts didn't reveal themselves, and it had been many years since they showed themselves. They never asked about Zhu Road country's internal affairs. Even if the king was replaced, they wouldn't care. They would only show themselves when Zhu Road country was facing a calamity. And what Yuan Tsang was worried about was the hall's hall. The reason why these experts didn't interfere in the fight for the throne was because no matter who the throne ended up in, it would still be someone from Zhu Road country. If they secretly supported the pro-peace faction to suppress the pro-war faction, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if they wanted to influence the candidate for the throne, it was very likely that the experts from the hall would be drawn out. At that time, they would probably have to stay here forever. Yu Ruifeng continued. Yuan Tsang's words aren't without reason. Lung Shiqi said, I've considered this point before, but what if someone else begged us to get involved? Yuan Tsang thought for a while and asked, You mean the pro-peace faction will take the initiative to ask us for help? That's right. Lung Shiqi nodded and said, The pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction are equal in power. It's impossible for them to quickly crush the other side. And we're that extra power that suddenly appeared. Especially Lord Yu, who has the strength of Heaven-Man Unity Stage. He's definitely a crucial power. Also, the pro-war faction's Prince Gus has come. The pro-peace faction's people will probably come soon. Yuan Tsang could be the great supervisor, so he definitely had the ability. He thought carefully and said, Yes, Prince Gus's attitude was very humble when he came. I think he also had the intention of giving us face. When the right opportunity comes, he will definitely contact us secretly. Yu Ruifeng's eyes were always on Lung Shiqi. He was a little surprised that Lung Shiqi could make this chaotic matter so orderly so quickly. So he admired Lung Shiqi even more. He said, "You're all right." Being able to find a breakthrough in the chaos and continue to complete the mission is the ability and quality that we Dark Thunder Guards should have. It's just that the information we have is still too little. Pass down the order. Let all the Dark Thunder Guards use all means to inquire about the king's death and the details of the two factions. Yes. Lung Shiqi and Yuan Tsang answered at the same time, then left Yu Ruifeng's room. In fact, Lung Shiqi didn't have much to do, because he only had Guan Feihong as a subordinate, and he had already sent him out early in the morning. So he went back the way he came and continued to cultivate. However, it was a pity that there were too many people in this post house. Someone could come back to find him at any time, so he couldn't calm down to open up the spirit vein. The whole day passed just like that. What made him a little puzzled and worried was that Guan Feihong still hadn't returned. Lung Shiqi immediately opened his supercilious eyes. There was no Guan Feihong's spiritual aura within a radius of 7 to 8 miles. Where did he go? He muttered softly, but he wasn't too worried. No matter what, Guan Feihong's cultivation was at the late stage of the spiritual pulse realm, and he was a blood-clothed assassin of the blood-clothing pavilion. It wouldn't be so easy for something to happen to him. But then he was slightly stunned, because he unexpectedly found Mo Huaisho's spiritual aura near the post house. What does Mo Huaisho want to do by approaching the post house? What is her identity in Zhu Lu country? Lung Shiqi's thoughts turned quickly. He locked onto Mo Huaisho's aura and found that her figure was slowly approaching someone. That person was Jill. Chapter 355. Ever since Jill was captured at Ai Ming Mountain, he hadn't had a good life. Now, he was brought here as a witness and was locked up in the woodshed of the post hostel. There were even 2 spirit pulse realm dark lightning emissaries guarding the door. Dark lightning emissaries were all elites of the Dark Lightning Guards, but these 2 people didn't know that a figure had already sneaked into the woodshed. After Jill's arm was cut off and his cultivation was sealed by Lung Shiqi, they didn't torture him. But his face was ashen, as if he had nothing left to live for, because he was very clear that as long as the Dark Lightning Guards handed him over to Zhu Lugua, he would only end up dead. But at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. This person was wearing a mask and was shrouded in a layer of faint black gas. Once this person appeared, he released a few goo worms into Jill's nose and mouth. This person was Mo Huaisho in disguise. Jill immediately felt as if his throat was being squeezed tightly, making it hard for him to breathe. I ask you answer. Otherwise, you will die from being eaten by 10,000 goo worms. Mo Huaisho's voice was as cold as ice, making one shiver. As a citizen of Zhu Lugua, Jill obviously knew how tragic it was to be eaten by 10,000 goo worms. He instantly nodded. Mo Huaisho asked coldly, "Who instructed you to go to Zhu Lugua to collect iron essence?" Jill's eyes flickered. He said, It's Prince Gus." "Nonsense," Mo Huaisho shouted. "I think you really want to try the taste of goo worms." Mo Huaisho moved his finger, and the goo worms in Jill's body immediately started to devour his flesh. But his throat suddenly couldn't make any sound. Jill was in so much pain that his whole body twitched. After a few breaths, his whole body was soaked in sweat. Mo Huaisho said coldly, "Still not telling the truth?" Jill's eyes were filled with fear and panic. "I am telling the truth." "Good, very good. Seems like you won't shed tears until you see the coffin." Mo Huaisho prepared to torture Jill again, but who knew that Jill actually closed his eyes and put on a look of defiance. Seeing this, Mo Huaisho also felt that it was a little tricky. She didn't expect Jill to be a tough nut to crack. Right now, she had sneaked in secretly. There were people from the Dark Thunder Guards guarding outside the door. If she made any noise, they would be alarmed. Once she was discovered by the Dark Thunder Guards this time, the Dark Thunder Guards would definitely guard Jill strictly in the future. It would be impossible for her to sneak in again. Just when Imo didn't know what to do, a voice came from outside the door. "My two colleagues, Jill seems to know his place. So it's Lord Liu." "Greetings, Lord Liu." "Don't worry, Lord Liu. Jill knows his place." That's good. Thank you for your hard work. I have something to ask Jill. Please open the door." Imo, who was in the woodshed, recognized the voice the moment he heard it. It was Liu Xingji's voice. "He's here too?" "That's right. He was the one who captured Jill and ruined the plan to collect refined iron. He should be here." However, when she heard that he was about to come in, she secretly cursed her bad luck. She lowered her voice and said to Jill, "You're a smart person. You should know what to say and what not to say. Let's talk when we have time." Then, the black gas around Imo surged and his figure disappeared. Creak! The door of the woodshed was opened. Lung Shichi walked in and closed the door. He saw that Jill was sweating profusely and looked exhausted. However, he didn't show any surprise. Jill was also terrified. He didn't know how to explain to Lung Shichi. However, he had to thank Lung Shichi for coming to find him. This was equivalent to saving his life. However, Lung Shichi's next sentence made him horrified. Lung Shichi said, "Jill, I saved your life. How do you think you should repay me?" "What are you talking about? I don't understand." Jill was still stubborn. Lung Shichi nodded lightly and said, "You think I don't know what happened here? Then let me guess. Why would you rather be bitten to death by the goo worms than tell me the truth? There must be someone or something important that fell into the hands of the mastermind." Hearing this, Jill's eyes narrowed slightly. Although he recovered quickly, Lung Shichi's sharp senses still caught it. Lung Shichi waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not interested in your matters. I'm also not interested in the mastermind. After all, I'm from the Thunderstorm Dynasty and can't be bothered to get involved in your Zhu Lu country's mess. However, there's a piece of news that you might not know." "What?" Jill's heart skipped a beat. He felt that what Lung Shichi was going to say next would definitely be shocking. Lung Shichi said in an indifferent tone, "Your king is dead. The king is dead." This sentence was as simple as saying, "I've eaten Lung Shichi's mouth." However, in Jill's ears, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. He was instantly stunned. At this moment, Lung Shichi's eyes suddenly emitted 2 rays of 5 colors. He seized the moment when Jill was distracted and used both the soul-scaring technique and the mind-stealing technique at the same time. A great fear struck Jill's soul and instantly pushed his mind to the verge of collapse. Lung Shichi asked in a tempting voice, "Were you ordered to sneak into the Western Desolate Province?" "Yes." Jill's eyes were empty as he said weakly, "Were you the one who secretly bribed Li Xianyang of the Profound Yang sect to collect large amounts of refined iron for you?" "Yes." "Were you forced to go to the Western Desolate Province to do this?" "Yes." At this point, Lung Shichi hesitated and asked tentatively, "Was it the state elder and state teacher who asked you to go?" Jill's face suddenly showed a painful expression. He actually almost broke free from the illusion. However, he failed in the end. He opened his mouth and said one word, "Yes." Hearing this answer, even Lung Shichi was shocked. Just now, he originally wanted to ask if it was Prince Gus who sent him. However, he immediately remembered that Imo secretly came to interrogate Jill in the middle of the night. This meant that Jill probably had a huge secret. On the surface, what Jill did was indeed in line with the actions of the pro-war faction. Therefore, including Lung Shichi and all the Dark Thunder Guards, subconsciously thought that the 2 princes were the masterminds behind this. However, Lung Shichi had a sudden inspiration to change his tone, and he had really discovered a shocking secret. It turned out that the people who sent people to the Western Desolate Province to collect refined iron were actually the 2 leaders of the peace faction. Chapter 356. If Jill's matter was arranged by the peacemakers, what was their purpose? The peacemakers naturally supported the peaceful coexistence of Zhulu country and the 5 surrounding countries, as well as the Thunderfire dynasty. Since that was the case, why did they need to collect large amounts of fine iron? Fine iron was obviously used to make weapons, but if it wasn't for war, why would they need to make so many weapons? Zhulu country didn't have a lot of soldiers. If it wasn't for war, they would have enough weapons and armor. Only during war would a large amount of weapons and armor be destroyed and require a large amount of fine iron to support the rear. Therefore, the peacemakers didn't want Jill to collect fine iron for war, so they must have other purposes. Lung Shiqi's mind was full of thoughts. He quickly remembered that the mind-controlling voodoo that Li Xianyang used to control him was brought by Jill. The mind-controlling voodoo was extremely precious. Even the princes and ministers of Zhulu country might not be able to get their hands on it. Who could easily take out the mind-controlling voodoo? Naturally, it would be the Gu God sect that specialized in voodoo. The sect leader of the Gu God sect was also the state teacher of Zhulu country. He was one of the higher-ups of the peacemakers. I should have thought of it. Lung Shiqi also felt that he had overlooked something. When he knew that the sect leader of the Gu God sect was one of the higher-ups of the peacemakers, he should have guessed it. However, it wasn't too late now. Now that Lung Shiqi had learned the truth from Jill, it was time for him to carefully consider another matter. That is, Jill was caught smuggling fine iron in the West Desolate Province. The Dark Thunder Guards came to investigate, and then the king's sudden death. Is there any connection between these matters? From the perspective of a conspiracy theory, could this series of events have been premeditated? To be honest, Jill's method of secretly collecting fine iron in the West Desolate Province wasn't that brilliant. When Lung Shiqi took over the Dark Thunder Manor in Mistchi City, he saw that the Du family was likely smuggling fine iron, but there was no conclusive evidence. This meant that the Dark Thunder Guards had been watching the Du family and Profound Yang sect for a long time. This was also the reason why the previous supervisor, Shayu, died. Therefore, even if there was no Lung Shiqi and Lung Shiqi might be able to unravel Jill's scheme in the future. After all, the Dark Thunder Guards were full of elites. As long as they found solid evidence and reported it to their superiors, destroying the Profound Yang sect would be a piece of cake. In other words, it was very likely that what Jill had done would still be discovered. After that, the Dark Thunder Guards would also come to the Zhu Road country to question him. The king would also die like this. Thinking of this, Lung Shiqi felt a chill run down his spine. If what he speculated was true, then the person behind this was truly terrifying. If what he speculated was true, then there would definitely be major changes waiting for them in the future. It was actually very simple to prove that his guess was correct. Lung Shiqi continued to ask while Jill was still under the control of the illusion. Are you the only one who sneaked into the western wilderness to collect iron? No. Lung Shiqi's eyes narrowed. He already knew the answer. It seems that not only in the northern region of the western wilderness, but also in other regions, there were people similar to Jill doing the same thing. If they stayed in the western wilderness for a long time, sooner or later they would be exposed. This also meant that the Dark Thunder Guards would come to the Zhu Road country sooner or later. All of this was indeed the same as Lung Shiqi's guess. But then, his brows deeply furrowed. Since the peace faction spent so much effort to trick them into coming to the Zhu Road country, then the king's death was most likely related to the peace faction. Now, what Lung Shiqi was most concerned about was, what was their purpose? He faintly felt that they had been deeply involved in a terrible whirlpool. Just as Lung Shiqi was thinking hard, there was suddenly a big commotion in the inn. His heart tightened, and he hurriedly walked out of the woodshed. Jill's eyes rolled back, and he fainted. Lung Shiqi quickly arrived at the courtyard of the post house. He saw several hundred Zhu country's guards had already surrounded the place so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. More than 10 people were confronting each other in the courtyard, including Unwavering and Yuan Song. As for the other side, it was Prince Gus and Prince Heli from the war faction. What surprised him the most was that Guan Feihong was standing right next to Prince Gus. At this moment, Guan Fei Hong was covered in injuries, and his expression was somewhat stiff. More importantly, Lung Shiqi actually felt a familiar aura from Guan Fei Hong's body. Heart-controlling goo. Prince Heli and Prince Gus looked similar in appearance. It seemed like they were a pair of brothers. The difference was that Prince Heli was tall and big. Just by standing there, he looked like a ferocious beast. Prince Heli angrily shouted at Yu Ruifeng. Yu Ruifeng, it really was your Thunderfire dynasty's people who killed the king. Now that the witness is here, let's see how you're going to quibble. When Yu Ruifeng saw Lung Shiqi coming over, he immediately transmitted his voice. What's going on? How did your people fall into their hands and accuse us of assassinating the king? When Lung Shiqi sensed the heart-controlling goo in Guan Fei Hong's body, he knew what was going on. However, he couldn't say it out loud and could only explain, Sir, I don't know either. I sent Guan Fei Hong out to scout this morning, but he didn't return at night. I didn't expect him to be captured by Zhu Road Country. But, sir, you should be able to see that Guan Fei Hong's condition isn't right. Perhaps they used some method to control him. Yu Ruifeng nodded inwardly. Facing the two princes of Zhu Road Country, he didn't lose out in terms of aura. He said, Princes, I respect you as princes of your country, which is why I'm negotiating with you. What's laughable is that as princes, you can't even see that they're trying to drive a wedge between us. Truly disappointing. What did you say? Prince Heli's eyes widened in anger. At this moment, Prince Gus pulled him back and said calmly, Sir Yu, we caught this person near the city gate tonight. He wanted to escape the city, but we interrogated him and he told us the truth about your assassination of the king. Sir Yu, you should give us a suitable answer, right? Otherwise, even if you're from the Thunderfire dynasty, we'll still take revenge for his majesty with our lives. At the end, Prince Gus's tone was filled with bloodthirst. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but feel anxious. He had guessed the truth, but there were too many people here, and he couldn't tell Yu Ruifeng. Moreover, even if he said it, Zhu Road Country's people might not believe him. On the contrary, they might even use Guan Fei Hong as one of his people to refute him. Lung Shiqi narrowed his eyes and forced himself to calm down to find a solution. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. He found a breakthrough. Chapter 357. The breakthrough that Lung Shiqi thought of was to help Guan Fei Hong get rid of the mind controlling voodoo. However, it was not easy to get rid of the mind controlling voodoo. After all, he did not have 9 Li's powerful soul power that could directly devour the mind controlling voodoo's soul. So he thought of an old method, using illusions to get rid of illusions. Lung Shiqi had also studied and refined mind controlling voodoo before. He knew that mind controlling voodoo was actually constantly releasing illusions to control people's minds. So Lung Shiqi thought of the method that he used in the Phantom Realm to make Guan Fei Hong fall into the illusion again. It might help him temporarily get rid of the mind controlling voodoo. The reason why it was temporary was because the mind controlling voodoo was constantly releasing illusions, and Lung Shiqi could not do it. However, it was enough as long as he could get rid of the mind controlling voodoo in a short period of time. Yu Ruifeng was still arguing with the two princes, but they did not seem to have any intention of fighting. Lung Shiqi also guessed that they would not fight because once they did, there would be no room for retreat. Lung Shiqi hid behind people and secretly forced out a few drops of essence blood to form the ghost blood tattoo on his forehead. At the same time, a majestic mental power surged out. Guan Fei Hong was also in the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm. If Lung Shiqi wanted to make him fall into the illusion instantly, he would have to use all his strength. Lung Shiqi did not hide his actions and was quickly discovered by the people of Zhu Lugua, especially since the two princes were also in the unity of heaven and man realm. They noticed Lung Shiqi's mental power. Prince Heli immediately shouted, "Where did this junior come from? Do you want to fight?" Yu Ruifeng was also a little surprised by this, but he thought that Lung Shiqi must have his reasons for doing this. Moreover, no matter what, he had to protect Lung Shiqi. He moved his feet and vaguely protected Lung Shichi behind him. Before Guan Feihong could say anything, he saw Lung Shichi's eyes shoot out colorful lights. Then, Guan Feihong's face became a little distorted. His expression was sometimes painful, sometimes sluggish, and sometimes very shrewd. Guan Feihong opened his mouth and said intermittently, "My heart is controlled." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Yu Ruifeng made a prompt decision and shouted, "Princes, what is the meaning of this? You actually secretly controlled the Dark Thunder Guards to point us? Do you think the Dark Thunder Dynasty is easy to bully?" Prince Gus and Prince Holy's expressions froze. Things had gone beyond their expectations. "Huh!" Lung Shichi suddenly roared. He had already unleashed his mental energy to the maximum, and the invisible mental energy around him even stirred up gusts of wind. This scene shocked many people. Even a Spirit Aperture Realm Spirit caster might not have this level of spirit pulse. Under Lung Shichi's full power illusion, Guan Feihong's eyes finally regained some clarity. He also knew that he didn't have much time, so he quickly said, "It's the Goo God Sect's leader, Sang Hetone. He used goo worms to control me and deliberately let me be captured by the Imperial Guards so that the princes would attack the Dark Thunder Guards." After saying this, Guan Feihong's eyes lost their light again. Lung Shichi panted and stopped the illusion. Just letting Guan Feihong regain his consciousness for 2 breaths was already his limit. At this point, the truth had already surfaced. Even if the people of Zhu Lu didn't cultivate goo, they had seen it before. At this moment, they could see that Guan Feihong was hit by some powerful goo. In other words, they were all played. The 2 princes' faces were uglier than the other. Prince Gus took the lead and said, "Lord Yu, so it was all a misunderstanding. You and I were both tricked. Lord Yu, please don't blame us." Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed, and he said with a mocking tone, "Even if someone was secretly manipulating you, you're both honorable princes. You're really capable to be fooled by such a small trick." Prince Heli's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. At this moment, he was a bit glad that he didn't act too impulsively. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. He walked in front of Yu Ruifeng with a twisted face. The Dark Thunder Guards thought he was going to attack, but he lowered his head and said, "Yu Ruifeng, Hili did not consider this matter thoroughly and almost caused a disaster. Hili apologized to you." At the end of his speech, he even cupped his hands towards Yu Ruifeng in the Thunderblaze dynasty's etiquette. Seeing this, Lung Shichi felt that Prince Heli was a straightforward man who could let go of things easily. Forget it. Yu Ruifeng could only give up. Even a prince bowed his head to him. What else did he want? Yu Ruifeng lowered his voice and said, "However, since someone dared to scheme against the princes and the Dark Thunder Guards, I won't take this lying down. What do the 2 princes think?" Yu Ruifeng was also very depressed. In the morning, they had discussed that they would wait for the peacemakers to come to their door. However, they didn't expect that it would be the 2 princes from the war faction who came to their door to denounce them. This had already disrupted their plans twice in a row. Just as he didn't know what to do, Lung Shichi broke the deadlock. Now that the clouds had cleared, Yu Ruifeng's heart gave birth to other thoughts. Prince Gus and Prince Heli both understood the meaning behind his words. He wanted them to join hands to deal with the peacemakers. Prince Gus's eyes flashed. If they could get the support of Yu Ruifeng and the Dark Thunder Guards, they would have a great chance of winning. However, this wasn't a brilliant plan. The more brilliant plan was to use the controlled Guan Feihong as a spy to make the peacemakers think that the Dark Thunder Guards and the war faction had completely fallen out. In this way, the peacemakers would take the initiative to contact the Dark Thunder Guards. When the time comes, the Dark Thunder Guards would be a bomb buried beside the peacemakers. Prince Gus immediately said, "Lord Yu is right. Prince Heli and I hate being schemed against the most. As for the person behind this, we brothers will definitely show them who's behind this. However, it would be best if we could get Lord Yu's help." Yu Ruifeng glanced at the guard around him and then looked at Guan Feihong. He didn't say anything. Prince Gus smiled and said, "Don't worry, Lord Yu. The people we brought tonight are all our trusted subordinates. They won't leak anything out. Yu Ruifeng nodded first, but in the next moment, he threw a punch at Prince Gus. Prince Gus's eyes flickered with uncertainty as he also threw a punch at him. Although the two fists did not explode with any powerful spiritual energy or spiritual light, when the two collided, a terrifying wave of spiritual energy suddenly blasted out, shaking everyone around and forcing them to retreat again and again. Lung Shiqi quickly retreated. He knew that the show had begun. Chapter 358. Boom! A loud explosion resounded in the sky above the inn, and all the tiles in the inn's courtyard were sent flying. Fortunately, the surrounding people were all spirit cultivator, and no one was injured, but they couldn't help but be flustered. Yu Ruifeng and Prince Gus, these two spirit cultivators at unity of heaven and man realm, fought. Even if they didn't use any spirit techniques or full strength, it was still shocking enough. Prince Gus roared with a red face. What a good Dark Thunder Guard! What a good Yu Ruifeng! The witnesses are here, and you still refuse to admit it. Yu Ruifeng also roared. What a joke! The king of a small country is nothing. Even if he was tied up in front of me, I would be too lazy to kill him. Impudent! You dare to insult the late king in front of me. Prince Heli jumped out and started to add on to his act. Yu Ruifeng coldly shouted, Humph! I'm standing right here. Let's see who dares to make a move. If we die here, your Zhulu country will be erased from the falling star continent. You! The two princes glared at each other, but they didn't make a move. The two sides argued for a while, then Prince Gus said, Guards, from today onwards, surround the inn. Without special orders, no one is allowed to enter or leave. Prince Heli fiercely said, Just wait. Wait until we find conclusive evidence. Even if we kill you on the spot, the Thunderflame dynasty won't have anything to say. Yu Ruifeng's face was gloomy, and he spat out 2 words. I won't see you off. Immediately, the two princes brought a portion of the guards and Guan Feihong out of the inn. Lung Shiqi watched from the side as they tried their best to perform. He estimated that by tomorrow morning, the news of the Dark Thunder Guard's inspector and Prince Gus's fight would spread through the streets. And with the inn surrounded by the guards, everyone would know that the two princes had completely fallen out with the Dark Thunder Guard. At this time, Yu Ruifeng gave a look to Lung Shiqi and Yuan Song, then turned and walked into the room. Lung Shiqi understood and followed. Yu Ruifeng closed the door and said to Lung Shiqi, You did very well. Yuan Song also said with great admiration, I didn't expect Supervisor Lu's observation to be so meticulous, to be able to see that Guan Feihong was being controlled. You were even able to break that strange technique. Truly admirable. Lung Shiqi said modestly, Sirs, you flatter me. I only saw the clues because I know Guan Feihong very well. But Yu Ruifeng said, You have indeed made a great contribution in this matter. I will remember this in my heart. If you hadn't temporarily dispelled that technique today, I'm afraid we really might have died here. At this point, Yu Ruifeng's face darkened. Humph, the sect leader of the Gu God sect is really something. Then Lung Shiqi told him about his interrogation of Jill and his suspicions. When Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song heard this, their faces sank. At this point, they all understood that the Peace faction was secretly manipulating everything behind the scenes. Yu Ruifeng's eyes suddenly revealed a shocking cold light. He was able to sit in the position of the Western Wilderness County's inspector because of his shrewdness and skill. Moreover, his style of doing things had always been radical. This time, the Peace faction had secretly schemed against him from the beginning to the end, so he naturally had to retaliate. As for the mission, as long as he could make Zhu Lugua obediently not cause trouble, the mission would be considered completed. Yu Ruifeng said in a low voice, We are now standing with the War faction, but I believe that the Peace faction will definitely come to me in 2 days. At that time, I will also agree to help them. Then, we will continue to sow discord between the two sides in secret and slowly weaken their strength. When the time is right, we will choose one side to take the throne. Lung Shiqi nodded secretly. Yu Ruifeng's thoughts were similar to his. He was treating himself as a double agent and was planning to trap both sides. The more the war faction and the peace faction fought, the weaker Zhu Luwa would become, which was naturally beneficial to the Thunderflame dynasty. However, Lung Shiqi felt that what they lacked the most now was information. It had only been a day and a night since they came to Zhu Luwa, but so many unexpected and dangerous things had happened. Moreover, they were all very passive. That was because their information was simply too limited. Even now, they hadn't even entered the palace gates, so they still didn't know how the king died. The Dark Thunder Guards that were sent out to collect information also had very little information. Therefore, after chatting with Yu Ruifeng for a while, Lung Shiqi decided to go out and investigate himself. Taking advantage of the night, he easily left the post house that was surrounded by the Imperial Guards using the Hand of Earth. Then, he quickly went around the entire Monarch City. His purpose was to light up the entire Monarch City's system map. At the same time, he also used the supercilious eyes to look for traces of Mo Huaishou. When he finished opening the system map, it was already the middle of the night, and he had already locked onto Mo Huaishou's position. After Mo Huaishou failed to interrogate Jill, she went to a slum in the north of the city. Zhu Luwa had never been rich. Even in Monarch City, there were slums. Lung Shiqi remembered that when he first found Mo Huaishou by chance, she was in the palace, which meant that her status was not low. But now, she actually went to the slums. There must be some unspeakable secrets there. Lung Shiqi quietly approached the slums and immediately found Mo Huaishou's spiritual aura. However, beside her, there was an aura that was slightly stronger than hers. It should also be his spirit aperture realm cultivator, but his realm was slightly higher than Mo Huaishou's. Lung Shiqi knew that experts in the spirit astral realm could sense all kinds of auras around them, but spirit aperture realm experts couldn't. Therefore, he directly sank into the ground and quietly approached Mo Huaishou's position. When he got closer, he heard Mo Huaishou's voice. This time, she was using her original voice. Jill refused to let go. Now, Prince Gus and Prince Heli have already found the Dark Thunder Guards. Especially since Prince Heli has a fiery temper, I'm afraid things will get out of hand. Another person said, "That's not necessarily true. Prince Heli looks careless on the surface, but he's actually very meticulous. Even so, it's completely impossible for the pro-war faction to win over the Dark Thunder Guard support. This strong force will benefit the pro-peace faction." That's not necessarily true. As long as the princess consort goes to meet Yu Ruifeng before the state elder and state preceptor, she might be able to win over the Dark Thunder Guards. Let Mother personally go? That's impossible. Mo Huaishou's voice suddenly became cold. Hearing this, Lung Shiqi suddenly felt an explosion of information. Mo Huaishou was actually the king and princess consort's daughter? In other words, Mo Huaishou was actually the princess of Zhu Luwa. Chapter 359. Lung Shiqi was even more puzzled. Since Mo Huaishou was the princess of Zhu Lu country, why would she run to the West Desolate Province? She even came up with the name of the great thief, Mo Huaishou. But Lung Shiqi wasn't very clear about the members of the royal family of Zhu Lu country. He only knew that the king indeed had a daughter, but he didn't know what her name was. Lung Shiqi suppressed the curiosity in his heart and continued to listen. "Your Highness, what time is it now? Are you still bothered about your identity and face? Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but no matter which faction ascends the throne, you and Princess Consort will definitely not have a good ending. Now the only way out and support is the Dark Thunder Guards." Mo Huaishou was silent for a while before she spoke. But this time, her voice sounded a little sorrowful. "How could I not know what you said? But Imperial Mother and I are weak. We don't have military power, nor the support of the ministers in the court. How can we fight with the two factions? The Dark Thunder Guards will definitely not choose us. Furthermore, the Dark Thunder Guards are already suspected of assassinating Imperial Father. They can't even protect themselves, so what ability do they have to help us? Your Highness, don't belittle yourself. At least some of the clan relatives will support you. In addition, Your Highness, don't underestimate the Dark Thunder Guards. Those people will definitely not sit still and wait for death. At this time, they will definitely be eager to take the initiative. As long as Princess Consort can help them out of their current predicament, it will be equivalent to sending charcoal in snowy weather. It will be easy to rope them in. Furthermore, Your Highness often goes to the West Desolate Province. You should know what the Dark Thunder Guards are best at. Huaisho muttered. Dark Thunder Guards are best at investigation. That's right. The death of His Majesty has always been a mystery. Many people in the court think that they must first investigate the cause of death of the king and find the murderer who murdered the king. So the two princes of the pro-war faction were so anxious to start a conflict with the Dark Thunder Guards. If Princess Consort can invite the Dark Thunder Guards to help us investigate the king's death and find the murderer, not only can it help them clear their grievances, it can also help us win over many people's support. But the Dark Thunder Guards themselves are suspected of murdering Imperial Father. The two factions will never agree to let them investigate the cause of Imperial Father's death. Don't worry, Your Highness. As long as Her Highness is willing to step in, I will have a way. Sigh. All right, that's all we can do now. I'll have to trouble you then, senior brother. Your Highness is too polite. It is my honor to be of service to Your Highness. After that, the two left the slum separately. Lung Shiqi thought for a while. Judging from the conversation between the two, it seemed that the Princess Consort's faction was preparing to intervene in the fight for the throne, and they were also planning to rope in the Dark Thunder Guards. This was also reasonable. Actually, the Princess Consort's bloodline was not without hope. From the point of view of unwavering and the Dark Thunder Guards, they didn't want the pro-war faction to take over, nor did they want the pro-peace faction to take over. After all, it could be said that the peacemakers had been plotting against the Dark Thunder Guards from the beginning to the end. Therefore, the Princess Consort's bloodline was the most suitable. However, Lung Shiqi was very interested in Huaisho and the identity of this senior brother that she mentioned. He practiced the 1,000 goose spirit devouring skill. When he came to Zhulu country, he knew that this skill was a forbidden skill of the Gu God sect, and only the core disciples of the Gu God sect were qualified to practice it. Therefore, Huaisho must be a member of the Gu God sect, and so should that senior brother. But this was interesting. Logically speaking, Huaisho should belong to the pro-peace faction, but now she wanted to take over the throne by herself. Not only that, what made Lung Shiqi more curious was why Huaisho, as the princess of Zhulu country, would join the Gu God sect. There might be many unknown secrets hidden in it. Although he had obtained some useful information from this trip, it also raised more questions. Lung Shiqi shook his head. He didn't want to delve into the inside story of the royal family of Zhulu country. The most important thing now was to inquire more information so that he could have some initiative. Next, he wandered in the mansions of various ministers in Yunwu City. He kept a respectful distance from all the masters of Gang's spirit realm in the mansion. In this way, he didn't return to his room until dawn. This night, he didn't gain much, but it wasn't little either. At least he had learned the cause of the king's death. The king's death was really strange. Although his health was not good, especially recently, it was getting worse and worse. But under the treatment of many imperial doctors, he could have held on for another 2 or 3 years. But just last night, he suddenly died. Last night, the king was still reading the memorials as usual. Suddenly, he fell on the table weakly and died. After examination, there was no wound on the king's body, and there was no sign of poisoning in his body. He died so strangely. Now, people of the two factions were trying hard to find the cause of the king's death and catch the king's assassin. Whoever could solve this problem would have a great advantage in fighting for the throne. But at present, the only suspect was the Dark Thunder Guard, because there was a witness in the Dark Thunder Guard, Guan Fei Hong. Thinking of Guan Fei Hong, Lung Shiqi couldn't help touching his chin. Guan Fei Hong could be said to be a knife of the pro-peace faction. But after Lung Shiqi saw through the mind-controlling insect. He became a knife of the pro-war faction and the Dark Thunder Guard. Guan Feihong was now a spy on 3 sides. But Lung Shiqi was more concerned about why he was implanted with a mind-controlling insect. According to Prince Heli, Guan Feihong was arrested near the city gate. Lung Shiqi remembered that he didn't find Guan Feihong even when he rolled his eyes, which meant that Guan Feihong probably left Yanwu City. And he was implanted with a mind-controlling insect, so it was very likely that he went to the Gu God sect. The Gu God sect was located on the Gu God Peak, dozens of miles away from Yanwu City. Before, Lung Shiqi had always suspected that Guan Feihong seemed to have something to do with the Gu God sect. Now it seemed that it was true. He probably wanted to go to the Gu God sect to inquire about information, but he was discovered. He was also recognized as a Dark Thunder Guard, so he was implanted with a mind-controlling insect to point out the Dark Thunder Guard. It seems that I still have to find a chance to bring Guan Feihong back. Lung Shiqi murmured. Guan Feihong must still have secrets that ordinary people didn't know, but he was now imprisoned in the prince's mansion. There were not only spirit cultivators in the gang spirit realm, but also masters of the oneness of heaven and men realm. Lung Shiqi didn't dare to sneak in there, so this matter had to be considered in the long run. Just as he was thinking about how to contact Guan Feihong, Yu Ruifeng asked someone to summon him. As soon as he saw Yu Ruifeng, he said something surprising. Last night, the leader of the Gu God sect, Sang Hetong, came to see me. Chapter 360. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but be slightly surprised. He wasn't surprised that the Gu God sect hierarch could easily get past the Imperial Guards outside. It was because this was nothing to an expert in the unity of heaven and man realm. He was surprised that the Gu God sect's leader came so quickly. Lung Shiqi was still thinking that now that the show had just begun, the pro-war faction had already shown up, and the princess's faction was ready to make a move. It was time for the pro-peace faction to appear. But last night, one of the leaders of the pro-peace faction, the Gu God sect's leader, Sang Hetong, had already come to find Yu Ruifeng. Yu Ruifeng set up an isolation restriction and said to Lung Shiqi and Yuan Song, Sang Hetong really came to find us to cooperate and can temporarily remove our suspicion. Lung Shiqi raised his eyebrows when he heard this. The pro-peace faction and the princess's faction wanted to help them clear their suspicion. It seemed that there would be a good show to watch. Now, we have a foot in both boats, and what we need to do is sink both boats. Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed fiercely, but Lung Shiqi thought to himself, I'm afraid we're not in 2 boats, but 3. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. My lord, Princess Bess had a conflict with the Imperial Guards outside the post house. Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song were both surprised. Why did the princess come to find them? She even had a conflict with the Imperial Guards. Didn't this offend the 2 princes? Zhu Lu country wasn't a hereditary system, and if one of the 2 princes ascended the throne in the future, this princess would suffer. But since she was already here, there was no reason to not see her. Yu Ruifeng immediately rushed to the gate of the post house with Lung Shiqi and Yuan Song. Princess Bess looked to be in her 30s. She wasn't extremely beautiful, but she was full of luxurious and graceful temperament. At this moment, she angrily stared at the Imperial Guard who stopped her. I'll say it again, get out of the way. Please forgive me, Princess. The 2 princes personally ordered that unless there is a special order, no one is allowed to enter or leave. Please don't make things difficult for me. The Imperial Guard half knelt in front of Princess Bess, but he didn't move half a step. Special order? I wonder if this token in my hand can be used. Bess took out a token that looked like it was made of jade, but wasn't made of jade, and seemed to be made of gold, but wasn't made of gold. All the Imperial Guards knelt down when they saw this item. Bess Wangfei directly stepped over the person who was blocking her. The guard didn't stop her anymore, because what Bess Wangfei took out was the royal token of Zhu Lu. It symbolized the highest authority in Zhu Lu country. At this time, Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed with surprise. He went forward and cupped his hands. Greetings, Your Highness. Wang Fei first smiled gently at Yu Ruifeng, but she did not speak to Yu Ruifeng. Instead, she turned and spoke to the Imperial Guards kneeling on the ground. I can prove that His Majesty's death has nothing to do with the Dark Thunder Guards. You can go back now. The Imperial Guards hesitated. They didn't dare to disobey the prince's orders, but they didn't dare to disobey the king's orders either. In the end, they could only say in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." Then, the Imperial Guards left in a neat formation like the tide. Lung Shiqi and the others saw all of this. He knew that Wang Fei must have asked the Dark Thunder Guards for help. Best Wang Fei then smiled at Yu Ruifeng and said, "I've wronged Lord Yu and the Dark Thunder Guards. Please don't blame me." Yu Ruifeng also revealed a smile. "It's an honor for Wang Fei to come here. Wang Fei, please come in." "Wait." A rough voice suddenly came. Lung Shiqi looked over and saw the tall Prince Heli arrive in front of the guest house like a meteor. Wang Fei's eyes flickered, and there was an undetectable trace of panic in them. Prince Heli walked over with large strides. His eyes were wide open and filled with anger. It looked a bit scary from afar. "Bess, was it you who withdrew the Imperial Guards?" He actually called Wang Fei by her name, and there wasn't the slightest bit of respect in his tone. It was even questioning. Wang Fei's expression darkened. She hadn't expected Prince Heli to come so quickly. She had only said a few words. Furthermore, Prince Heli's attitude toward her made her even angrier, but she didn't dare flare up. She continued to smile and said, "Prince Heli, you really came quickly. Answer my question." Prince Heli didn't want to waste words with her, and his attitude was very unyielding. Wang Fei's smile faded. She took out the king's order and pointed at Prince Heli. "What? Does Prince Heli want to defy the king's order? Or are you already looking down on Wang Ling?" Prince Heli's face twitched a few times, and he shouted in a low voice, "Humph. Even if you have the king's order, you can't get close to the Dark Thunder Guards at will. They're a major suspect in the assassination of His Majesty the King." "Nonsense. His Majesty the King's death has nothing to do with the Dark Thunder Guards. I can testify to that. Do you know that you almost made a big mistake and almost pushed our Zhu Road country into the abyss?" Wang Fei's tone also became unyielding. "The princess is right." At that moment, an old man with white hair and a white beard walked in with a walking stick, accompanied by a group of people. He was Zhu Road country's elder, Chu Li. Lung Shiqi's eyes narrowed. The three forces vying for the throne of Zhu Road were now gathered, but the leader of the Gu God sect, Sang Hitong, and Prince Gus weren't here. Chu Li's appearance here was completely out of Wang Fei's and Prince Heli's expectations, but within Yu Ruifeng and Lung Shiqi's expectations. Chu Li's words shocked Wang Fei and Prince Heli at the same time. Judging from Chu Li's words, he seemed to be supporting Wang Fei. Chu Li ignored their astonishment. He looked straight at Yu Ruifeng and said, "Lord Yu and the Dark Thunder Guards never left the post house on the night of His Majesty's death, so how could they assassinate His Majesty? As for the witness, I think it was tampered with by someone, so it can't be taken seriously." Wang Fei's mood was very complicated. Chu Li's sudden appearance could suppress Prince Heli, but this way, the Dark Thunder Guards wouldn't only remember her benefits. She gritted her teeth and said, "That's right. I heard that the Dark Thunder Guards are best at investigating and solving cases. Why don't we trouble them to investigate the cause of His Majesty's death?" Prince Heli immediately shouted, "Impossible. I'm not asking for your opinion. Does Lord Yu think this is feasible?" Wang Fei directly asked Yu Ruifeng for his opinion. Yu Ruifeng's eyes swept over the three people present. Then he looked at Yuan Tsang and Lung Shiqi. He nodded. "Since the princess has spoken, it would be unsatisfactory if we refuse. But I don't know if the elder and Prince Heli will agree." Yu Ruifeng's words caused the three parties to have their own thoughts. Chapter 361. Best Wang Fei had the Dark Thunder Guards investigate the king's death, which surprised Prince Heli and Elder Chu Li. But they quickly realized that Best Wang Fei wanted to use this opportunity to win over the Dark Thunder Guards. All three sides wanted the Dark Thunder Guards' help, but it was clear that the Dark Thunder Guards could only choose one side. Now, The peacemakers thought the Dark Thunder Guards were on their side. The warmongers thought the Dark Thunder Guards were spies they had planted in the peacemakers. Only Bess Wong Fei hadn't clearly won over the Dark Thunder Guards, so she was the most anxious. But fortunately, Yu Ruifeng had given her a clear answer. What she needed to do next was to ensure that the Dark Thunder Guards could investigate the king's death. Then she would have many opportunities to contact the Dark Thunder Guards. Elder Chu Li was in a bit of a dilemma. His trip today was to lift the Dark Thunder Guards' house arrest and give them face. This point happened to coincide with Bess Wong Fei, so he supported her from the beginning. But he didn't want to let the Dark Thunder Guards investigate the king's death. He had some understanding of the Dark Thunder Guards' abilities. If the Dark Thunder Guards really did intervene, they might be able to find the truth. But he had just stood on the Dark Thunder Guard's side, so he had no choice but to agree now. So he could only say, "This old man agrees with the Wong Fei's proposal." Prince Heli was inferior, so he could only hold his face and silently nod. Bess Wong Fei chuckled, "That is good. This matter should not be delayed. Please enter the palace as soon as possible, Lord Yu." "Don't worry, Wong Fei. After we arrange things, we will enter the palace to investigate the truth of the king's death." When Yu Ruifeng said this, he noticed Lung Shiqi give him a look. Yu Ruifeng immediately looked at Prince Heli. "Prince Heli, since the Wong Fei and Elder Chu Li can prove that the Dark Thunder Guard are not suspected of killing the king, then can my subordinate Guan Fei Hong be released?" Prince Heli snorted, "Yes." Everyone saw that the matter was settled, so there was no need to stay. Before Chu Li and Prince Heli left, they both looked at Princess Bess. Although they didn't reveal anything in their eyes, the threat in their eyes was obvious. Since the princess consort dared to interfere in the fight for the throne, then don't blame them for being merciless. However, Bess had no other choice. She knew that she couldn't hide the fact that she was here, but she had to do it. In this way, she had indeed offended both the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction. Perhaps she would be eliminated one day. However, if she didn't do anything, then no matter who ascended the throne, she would still be unable to escape death. Rather than waiting for death, why not take a gamble? After sending everyone away, Yu Ruifeng called Yuan Song and Lung Shiqi to discuss how to investigate the king's death and how to deal with the three parties to achieve their goals. However, Lung Shiqi said, "Darren, I will not follow you into the palace." Yu Ruifeng looked at him in confusion, but he didn't ask because he knew that Lung Shiqi would explain it to him. "I'm ashamed to say that I've only joined the Dark Thunder Guards for a short period of time. I really don't have much experience in investigating cases. I believe that with you, Darren, and Yuan Darren, we will be able to solve this case quickly. Your humble servant would like to start from Guan Fei Hong's clues and see what he encountered and discovered. If I'm not wrong, the person who planted the mind-controlling voodoo in him must be someone from the Gu God sect. This means that he has been in contact with the Gu God sect. We can inquire about the internal information of the Gu God sect through him." All right, Yu Ruifeng immediately agreed. He had a grudge against the Gu God sect. Moreover, Lung Shiqi was right. The Dark Thunder Guards would enter the palace to investigate, so it didn't matter if he joined them. It was better to let Lung Shiqi out and start with Guan Fei Hong. Maybe they could find another clue. At noon, Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song took a few Dark Thunder Guards into the palace. Lung Shiqi waited for Guan Fei Hong in the post house for a while. Lung Shiqi pulled him into the room and began to carefully observe Guan Fei Hong. Although Lung Shiqi himself was also affected by the mind-controlling voodoo, it was removed by Julie after that. Therefore, he wasn't very clear about the specific state of the affected person. At this moment, Guan Fei Hong was a little depressed, but there was nothing unusual. Lung Shiqi asked, "Old Guan, how do you feel?" Guan Fei Hong saw that Lung Shiqi even called him Old Guan. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but this made him feel a little familiar. He replied, "Darren, this feeling is very strange. Last time you temporarily removed the mind-controlling voodoo. Now I know that I've been poisoned. I also have my own consciousness. However, once the person who cast the spell orders me, I can't control myself and regard the order as an oracle. No matter what, I have to complete it. I see. Lung Shiqi understood. Then can you tell me now what is your relationship with the Gu God sect? Guan Feihong smiled bitterly. He stopped himself from speaking. Actually, this subordinate is originally from Zhulu country. My father is from a western wilderness prefecture, and my mother is from the Zhulu country. I inherited my father's appearance. When I was young, I was also a disciple of the Gu God sect. However, the Gu God sect was full of danger. The reason why my master accepted me was that he wanted to use me to refine voodoo. Later, I plotted to kill my master, but the matter was exposed. Therefore, I had to escape to the Western Wilderness Prefecture and, by chance, join the Bloodcloak Pavilion. It turned out that Guan Feihong was an abandoned disciple of the Gu God sect. Lung Shiqi asked again, "Then how did you get affected by the mind-controlling voodoo?" Alas, Guan Feihong sighed slightly. This is my bad luck. Originally, I planned to go to the Gu God sect to inquire about the news. Who knew that I would run into the Gu God sect's leader, Sang Hitong? He didn't recognize my true identity, but he recognized my identity as a Dark Thunder Guard. Therefore, he thought of using me to provoke the Dark Thunder Guard and the Jingoist sect. Unexpectedly, he ran into Sang Hitong when he went out. Lung Shiqi had to admit that Guan Feihong's luck was really bad. Lung Shiqi tapped the table with his finger and thought quickly. Guan Feihong's mind-controlling voodoo was personally planted by Sang Hitong. Therefore, it would definitely not be used to provoke the Dark Thunder Guard and the Jingoist sect. Moreover, the Jingoist sect, led by Elder Chu Li and Sang Hitong, tried their best to lead the Dark Thunder Guard to Zhulu country. He was afraid that it was not as simple as a conflict with the Jingoist sect. While he was thinking, Guan Feihong's body suddenly stiffened and his eyes became hollow. Although he recovered in less than a breath's time, Lung Shiqi still noticed it. Chapter 362. Lung Shiqi saw Guan Feihong's strange behavior and knew that Sang Hitong must have given Guan Feihong some orders. He hurriedly asked, "Old Guan, what did Sang Hitong ask you to do?" Guan Feihong's eyes were filled with confusion. Sang Hitong? He's not here. Why would he ask me to do something? Lung Shiqi frowned. He thought to himself, what a powerful, mind-controlling voodoo. Fortunately, I had 9 Li by my side. Otherwise, I might not have been able to resist the control of the mind-controlling voodoo, even if I had the mind illusion world. Then he said to Guan Hongfei, "Empty your mind and don't resist my mental power." Guan Feihong nodded silently. Then, Lung Shiqi used the same trick again and cast a few illusions on Guan Feihong. This time, Guan Feihong gave up resisting, so it was easy to succeed. Guan Feihong immediately said, "Sang Hitong asked me to find out if the Dark Thunder Guards and the Jingoist faction had fallen out. He also asked me to secretly stop the Dark Thunder Guard from investigating the king's death." Very good. Lung Shiqi was delighted. Find a chance to send a message to Sang He. Tell him that we and the Jingoist faction are like fire and water. As for the other matter, you can just drag it out slowly. Yes, master. Guan Feihong suddenly thought of something and said, "Right, yesterday, Sang Hitong secretly brought a large number of experts from the Gu God sect into the king's city. I don't know why." Lung Shiqi's heart jumped. Brought a large number of experts? Where are their realms? They're all at the Sky Realm. I estimate that 80% of the Gu God sect's experts have been secretly arranged into the king's city. So it's like this. Lung Shiqi murmured. His eyes were shining. He was thinking that since most of the Gu God sect's experts were not at the Gu God Peak, then he could fish in troubled waters. Lung Shiqi had always remembered that his main purpose in coming to Zhulu country was not to complete the Thunderblaze dynasty's mission, but to collect a large number of Gu worms. Now that the back of the Gu God Peak was empty, there probably weren't many experts above the Spirit Aperture realm, so he decided to go there. In any case, he now had the right to act on his own, so he decided to make this trip. After that, Guan Feihong told Lung Shiqi everything he knew about Gushin Peak. After that, he put on his mask and left the city. The Gu God Peak was only a few dozen miles away from the imperial city of the Zhu Road. Lung Shichi used his ghost steps and arrived at the Gu God Peak at the beginning of the night. According to Guan Feihong's description, Gu God Peak actually had a sect-protecting formation, which was created by the previous sect master with countless efforts. Normally, this formation wouldn't reveal itself, but if it was activated, the entire Gu God Peak would be shrouded in poisonous fog. What Lung Shichi cared about the most was the place where the Gu worms were cultivated. It was on the mountainside of Gushun Peak, where there were several deep caves dedicated to cultivating Gu worms. This was also the destination of Lung Shichi's trip, but there were always experts guarding the caves, which was troublesome. There were also 2 Spirit Transformation Realm disciples guarding the entrance of the Gu God Peak. Lung Shichi bypassed them and entered the Gu God Peak. He opened his Byakugin and observed the surrounding spiritual aura. Sure enough, he found that there were only a few Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators below the mountainside of the Gu God Peak. He easily avoided one Gu God sect disciple after another and went straight to the Gu Worm Cave. As he neared the mountainside, he immediately saw 2 auras of Spirit Aperture Stage cultivators leaning against each other in the Waitai's field of vision. These 2 must be the people guarding the Gu Worm Nest. Lung Shichi had opened 56 spirit veins and had several powerful spiritual techniques. He was confident that he could fight against an early-stage Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator. But if it was 1 against 2, it was impossible. Moreover, this was the Gu God Peak. Once a fight broke out, it would immediately attract other Gu God sect disciples. So he couldn't use force, he could only use his wits. Outside the Gu Worm Cave, there was a male and female Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator sitting cross-legged. Their bodies were glowing with a faint green light. They were obviously cultivating. All of a sudden, a massive gray evil chi ghost shadow flashed and disappeared. The 2 opened their eyes at almost the same time. The female said, "Where did this evil spirit come from? How dare it cause trouble at the Gu God Peak?" Junior sister Chungbei, "Wait a moment, I'll go check it out." The male next to her stood up. Chungbei's expression was calm. She didn't say anything and just lightly nodded. The male immediately rushed towards the direction where the evil ghost figure disappeared. After a moment, another person wearing a chaotic mask appeared. This was naturally Lung Shichi. He stood out so openly, Chungbei's eyes suddenly burst out with a cold light. "I knew it was a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. I just happened to lack food for my Gu worms, so I'll use you to make up the numbers." Lung Shichi said, "Senior sister, you misunderstood. Who is your senior sister?" Chungbei's voice wasn't loud, but it made people feel as cold as winter. Lung Shichi didn't say anything. He raised his hand, and a green light flashed in his palm. There seemed to be a strange worm wriggling in the light. Chungbei's expression changed when she saw this. Gu Devouring Spirit Technique. How do you know the Gu Devouring Spirit Technique? Who the hell are you? Only the core disciples of the Gu God sect were qualified to cultivate this technique. Moreover, they had to be extremely talented disciples. Even Chungbei didn't have the opportunity to cultivate this technique. At this moment, she suddenly saw a stranger with the Gu Devouring Spirit Technique. How could she not be shocked? The technique was naturally passed down to me by the sect leader. It's not convenient for me to reveal my identity, but senior sister just needs to know that I'm not an outsider." Lung Shichi said lightly. Chungbei showed a suspicious expression. She didn't believe Lung Shichi's words, but the technique on his body couldn't be fake. There was no doubt that it was the Gu Devouring Spirit Technique. Chungbei asked, "In that case, what are you doing here?" "Of course, to get some Gu worms." "Do you have a Gu God token?" Lung Shichi's heart skipped a beat when he heard the words Gu God token. He remembered that Guan Feihong had mentioned the Gu God token to him. He couldn't help laughing. "Senior sister, you must be joking. The Gu God token has always been in the hands of the sect leader. How can I have it?" Chungbei's eyes flashed. She didn't get the Gu God token. She continued, "If you want to get the Gu worms, you have to go into the Gu Worm Cave to get rid of them. Do you dare to go in?" Chungbei made a hand seal, and a small mound behind her split open, revealing a large hole. One could see that there were all kinds of Gu worms inside, and it looked extremely terrifying. Lung Shiqi's face under the mask turned slightly pale. Since he dared to come here, he was naturally prepared. He immediately nodded and said, "Of course." Chapter 363. In fact, if a disciple came and went, they would at least need a token. However, Lung Shiqi didn't have anything. It was impossible to take the goo with just his mouth. Even if he had the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, it was still impossible. Moreover, the disciple didn't need to enter the cave with the token. The person in charge of guarding the cave just needed to take out the goo according to the list on the token. The reason why Changbai let Lung Shiqi enter was to test whether Lung Shiqi's 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique was real or not. After all, there were many strange things in this world. Maybe she could imitate the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. Therefore, she also wanted to see if Lung Shiqi dared to enter the cave. Could he collect the goo after entering? 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique was a technique that specialized in controlling goo. With this technique, 10,000 goo couldn't invade. He would definitely be fine if he entered the cave. If this cultivation method was fake, then it would naturally be eaten to death by countless goo worms. Changbai was a little surprised when she saw Lung Shiqi agree so readily. She secretly wondered if she was overthinking it. But out of caution, she still had to do this. After all, her senior brother had just left and Lung Shiqi appeared. This was too much of a coincidence. Under Changbai's watchful gaze, Lung Shiqi walked into the goo worm cave. There was no place to stand because everywhere he looked was filled with goo worms. Lung Shiqi used the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique and instantly felt a sense of familiarity with the countless goo. Moreover, the goo no longer rejected Lung Shiqi. Instead, they happily rushed over. Looking at the countless goo of different colors, Lung Shiqi didn't reject them all. He had studied goo worms before. The goo worms that could be nurtured in this goo worm cave were all common goo worms. The truly precious goo worms had to be nurtured by oneself. And Lung Shiqi didn't need goo worms with offensive abilities. It would be best if they had all kinds of strange abilities. Thus, Lung Shiqi was also observing these goo worms. Soon, he found a group of purple goo worms that looked like spiders. This type of goo worm was called the poisonous spider goo. If it was used together with the goo spirit spider web, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Lung Shiqi waved his hand, and dozens of poisonous spider goo crawled up his arm, breaking through his skin and entering his body. Strangely, there was no wound on Lung Shiqi's arm, nor was there any blood. This was the unique characteristic of the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, feeding the goo with one's own body. Seeing this, Changbai was finally relieved. Although she didn't know Lung Shiqi's identity, the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill was real. Next, Lung Shiqi discovered a type of goo called the meridian sucking goo. This type of goo would attach itself to the meridians after it entered the body and continuously suck away at the meridians. However, it would not destroy the meridians for a short period of time. That kind of inhuman pain was enough to make one shudder in fear. This meridian-sucking goo could be used to replace the centipede curse. Then, Lung Shiqi chose the goo that he liked in the cave. As time passed, Changbai's expression became more and more shocked, because even if it was her, she could not stay in the goo worm cave for so long. At this time, the senior brother who just left also came back. He saw someone enter the cave and asked Changbai, "Junior sister Chang, is that person?" Changbai retracted her gaze and shook her head. "I don't know, but he has the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill. He must be a disciple that some elder secretly took in." The senior brother was shocked when he heard that Lung Shiqi had the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill, but his eyes immediately turned into unwillingness and greed. He said in a low voice, "Junior sister, this person has a shady background. The evil aura phantom that floated away just now might have been made by him. He wanted to lure me away." "I know." Chungbai's expression was slightly cold. The senior brother frowned. Then why did you let him enter the cave? This time, Chungbai ignored him. The senior brother's eyes flashed, and he said in realization, "So, junior sister wants to use the cave to test whether he is real or not. Junior sister is really considerate. However, his identity is still too suspicious. I think we should still report this matter. If there is a problem, we won't be punished." Chungbai still didn't say anything and only nodded lightly. The senior brother's mouth twitched, and he snorted. He didn't say anything else, but his eyes kept flickering as he stared at Lung Shiqi. After half an hour, Lung Shiqi had already hidden over 1,000 goo in his body. It wasn't until he couldn't store any more that he reluctantly walked out. He saw the senior brother and sister as soon as he came out. He said, "Senior brother, senior sister, junior brother has already taken the goo, so I will take my leave." "Wait!" Senior brother suddenly shouted in a low voice. Lung Shiqi's footsteps paused, and he turned around. "Senior brother, what do you think? You don't have our sex identity token, nor do you have the goo token. Junior sister Chung is magnanimous and saw that you have the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill, so she let you in. But if you don't give us a reason, don't even think about leaving." Speaking of this, the senior brother's eyes turned sinister. Lung Shiqi snorted coldly. "Humph! I gave you face and called you senior brother. You are Lord Sect leader and are plotting something big, and I am a key part of it. As for my identity, if you really know my identity, I'm afraid even you will be killed. Do you still want to know?" The senior brother was shocked by Lung Shiqi's words. He couldn't tell if Lung Shiqi was telling the truth or not. Sect leader Sang He Tong was indeed plotting something big recently, and he needed the help of an outsider. Could this person be a key part of the sect leader's plan? It's fine if you don't believe me. After Lung Shiqi finished speaking, a strange rhythm came from his mouth. When the goo worms in the goo worm cave heard this sound, they all wriggled out excitedly. Chung and Bai exclaimed at the same time, "Imperial goo demonic sound." Immediately after, they looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Imperial goo demonic sound was a spiritual technique that only spirit aperture realm cultivators in the goo god sect could cultivate. This spiritual technique's rank was 4th level, neither high nor low. However, it could control goo in a large area, so only spirit aperture realm cultivators could cultivate it. The two of them also knew this spiritual technique, but what shocked them the most was that Lung Shiqi's imperial goo demonic sound was even more profound than theirs. A spirit aperture realm cultivator not only had the 10,000 goo devouring spirit skill, but also the imperial goo demonic sound. Furthermore, his cultivation level was even higher than theirs. At the very least, he was at the large success stage. Such a person was definitely a genius disciple that the sect should focus on nurturing. Lung Shiqi said indifferently, "Now you should believe me." Chapter 364. Lung Shiqi used the perfect imperial demonic sound to shock Chungbai and Chungbai. Seeing that they didn't say anything, he said, "Senior brothers and sisters, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first." Chungbai didn't say anything. The senior brother frowned and seemed to be hesitating. Finally, he cupped his hands and said, "Junior brother, take care." Lung Shiqi walked past the two, but Chungbai was a little surprised by the senior brother's decision. When Lung Shiqi's figure completely disappeared, the senior brother said, "Junior sister Chung, senior brother has something to do. Please don't take offense." Chungbai instantly guessed what he was going to do. "Senior brother Zhaoying, there are some things that you shouldn't care about." Zhao Ying's expression changed slightly. He squeezed out 2 stiff smiles and said, "I'm just going back to get something. Do as you wish." Zhao Ying looked in the direction Lung Shiqi left and quickly chased after him. After Lung Shiqi left, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get away so easily. However, since he had already completed the most important goal of this trip, he just needed to leave Goo God Peak as soon as possible. At that moment, he opened his supercilious eyes and instantly discovered Zhao Ying, who was rushing towards him. Lung Shiqi immediately used the ghostly spring steps and turned into a shadow. His speed was even faster than Zhao, who was at the spirit aperture stage. However, things didn't go so smoothly. After a short while, a group of more than 10 people appeared in front of Lung Shiqi and blocked his way. As a result, Lung Shiqi had no choice but to sink into the ground. He was already familiar with this kind of operation. However, at that moment, something unexpected happened. Not long after Lung Shiqi sank into the ground, he accidentally triggered a restriction. Suddenly, there was a flash of golden light around him. Then, before he could resist, he was directly enveloped by the golden light and pulled into the array. Lung Shiqi suddenly felt dizzy. However, he wasn't unfamiliar with this feeling. This was clearly something like a teleportation array. There was actually a teleportation formation hidden under the Gushan Peak. After the Lung Shiqi disappeared, Zhao Ying hurried over. His footsteps paused as he lowered his head and muttered with a frown. Strange, the Gu Worm's aura suddenly disappeared here? Don't tell me that person can disappear in a thin air? At this time, a group of Gu God Sect's disciples walked over. When they saw Zhao Ying, they all saluted. Zhao Ying immediately asked, "Have you seen a person wearing a mask?" Disciple did not see him. Zhao Ying's face immediately turned ashen. No, I must report this to the sect leader. As for Lung Shiqi, he only felt the ground beneath his feet disappear, and then he came to a world of golden glass. He looked around and found that the golden light all came from the golden lakes that were everywhere. It was the surface of the lakes that reflected the golden light. He immediately opened the system map, but it was pitch black. This meant that he couldn't use fate to escape. Lung Shiqi's heart sank. However, since he came here for no reason, he had to find a way to escape as soon as possible. He squinted his eyes and saw a person sitting in the middle of the endless golden lake. From afar, the person's figure was as thin as a stick. His hair was disheveled, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. However, Lung Shiqi felt that this person's aura was similar to Unigao's. This person was probably an expert in the unity of heaven and man realm. However, this person's hands and feet were bound by pale green chains. These chains were only as thick as a finger and did not look very sturdy. "Come here." An old voice came from the person's mouth. Lung Shiqi did not move. Instead, he took out the black jade sword. 90 demonic patterns climbed onto the sword's blade, and the spiritual energy in his body circulated. He was ready to activate the demonic beast blood pattern armor at any time. "Humph." The person snorted. To Lung Shiqi's horror, the demonic patterns on the sword's blade suddenly disappeared. Not only that, but more than half of the Gu insects that he had just collected in his body died in an instant. This made his heart ache, and at the same time, he deeply understood how terrifying this person was. At this point, Lung Shiqi simply put away the black jade sword and walked in front of the person. He cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, senior." The person raised his head, revealing two completely different eyes. One of his eyes was pale green, and it was filled with a fierce light. The other eye had a faint golden light, and it was filled with kindness. "Amiba, Amiba." This old man inadvertently killed hundreds of Gu insects. It is a sin. Bah, this brat dares to show hostility to this leader. He deserves to die. These two sentences came out of the person's mouth one after another. Although the voice was the same, the tone was completely different. Lung Shiqi's eyebrows, which were hidden under the mask, twitched slightly. He thought to himself, does this person have schizophrenia? What he found strange was that this person could actually say Amiba. Wasn't this something that only Buddhist disciples in his previous life would say? This old man is called Tu Deng, and I'm the previous leader of the Gu God sect. I'm also the founder of the Gu God sect. The Gu God sect is mine. This person's two consciousnesses spoke again, and these words shocked Lung Shiqi. So this person was actually the founder of the Gu God sect. Seeing Tu Deng in prison here, Lung Shiqi secretly guessed that the current leader, Sang Hetong, and Tu Deng definitely had some unspeakable secret. It was most likely that Sang Hatong wanted to usurp the throne, and he wanted to obtain something from Tu Deng, so he imprisoned him here. Tu Deng closed his green eyes, but that I was still trembling. He said, "If you want to escape, let me talk to little friend." Only then did that I calm down. Tu Deng's golden eyes immediately brightened. "Little friend, how should I address you?" "Junior, Lu Xingji." Long Shiqi did not say his real name, nor did he make it up. "Little friend Lu, I'm sure you've already guessed it. This old man brought you here in hopes that you can help this old man escape." Long Shiqi hesitated for a moment before saying, "Junior's cultivation is shallow. I do not know why Senior thinks I can do it." Tu Deng smiled, but perhaps he had not smiled for a long time. This smile was not only very stiff, it even looked a little scary. He said, "That unfilial disciple of mine, Sang Hatong, set up 3 seals here. The first one is these chains on my body. After several decades of research, this old man has found a way to break these chains. But once I break these chains, I will activate the second restriction, which is this boundless lake." Lung Shiqi looked around, but did not see anything special about this golden lake. Actually, this lake contains countless gold thread goo. Gold thread goo is a very special goo worm. Its existence can restrain 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique. If I break these chains, the countless gold thread goo will surge over and devour me. But all things in the world have a counter, and metal attribute cultivation methods can restrain gold thread goo. Saying so, Tu Deng looked at Lung Shiqi with a burning gaze. Lung Shiqi's heart tightened. It seemed like his secret was seen through. Wasn't the extreme gold mystic yang technique he cultivated a metal attribute cultivation method? But he was surprised that he was clearly using 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. But the other party could see that he also cultivated a metal attribute cultivation method. He thought deeper. Would Tu Deng be able to tell that he had cultivated even more techniques? Chapter 365. Tu Deng did not know what Lung Shiqi was thinking. He continued, "As for the third restriction, it is this world. This is a small-scale, alternate space that I discovered by chance. That is why I built the Gu Divine sect here. This space originally had an exit, but now the exit has been sealed by Sang Hitong. Although this old man can attempt to break the seal, Sang Hitong will definitely detect it. Thus, I thought of setting up a teleportation formation. Unfortunately, this formation needs someone to operate it from the other side to bring me out." At this point, Tu Deng stopped, and Lung Shiqi understood what he meant. Tu Deng had a way to break the first restriction, but he needed Lung Shiqi to block the golden silk goo and bring Tu Deng out from the outside. But what about after bringing him out? This was a Heavenman Unity realm mighty expert. After going out, he could casually kill him. As if he saw Lung Shiqi's apprehension, Tu Deng spoke again. But this time, Tu Deng's mouth did not move. His voice directly entered Lung Shiqi's ears. "Little friend, don't worry. I have already sworn that I will never kill again. But my evil thoughts will definitely not let little friend off, so little friend still needs to help me get rid of the other consciousness. Back then, while I was sealed here, my heart was filled with hatred. I only thought of revenge and gradually lost myself in hatred. Later, to escape, I created a metal attribute cultivation method, but metal attribute cultivation methods conflicted with 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique. They could not coexist. Thus, I comprehended a secret technique that allowed me to split my consciousness into 2 halves, separating all of my negative and dark emotions. That was how I formed my evil thoughts. However, the problem came along with it. Not only were we unable to coexist, but we were also constantly fighting for control of the body. If this continued, we would sooner or later perish together. I do not desire to live forever, but if I let the evil thoughts out, it will cause endless slaughter and sin. Unfortunately, even though I have the ability to kill him, I cannot do it. Thus, I can only trouble little friend." Lung Shiqi knew that Tu Deng's consciousness was split into good and evil thoughts. The one talking to him now was the good thoughts. This secret method was similar to his mind-splitting technique. Moreover, this good thoughts wanted to get rid of the evil thoughts. What shocked him was that Tu Deng kept talking about creating cultivation methods and secret techniques. He didn't take cultivation methods seriously at all. Furthermore, he was clearly trapped here, but he could still set up a teleportation formation. This ability was simply unheard of. Lung Shiqi's mind flashed with thousands of thoughts. If he could really get rid of the evil thoughts, it would be beneficial to him. His chances of survival would be higher. Regardless of whether this good thoughts Tu Deng was speaking the truth or not, at least he was much better than the evil thoughts. Thus, he said, Junior does not know what can I do to help Senior. By saying this, he had agreed to free Tudun and also agreed to help him get rid of his evil thoughts. However, Lung Shiqi did not know he had this ability. Tu Deng's good thoughts nodded. Little friend only needs to do two things. After this old man breaks the chains, use your 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique to attract the attention of the golden silk goo. Then use a metal-type cultivation method to block the golden silk goo. Little friend only needs to last 3 to 4 breaths of time. After that, this old man will send little friend out. Then little friend will use a secret method to bring me out. Lung Shiqi asked, Senior, aren't you afraid that this junior will run away after going out? Tu Deng smiled again. You won't. Why does Senior trust me so much? Lung Shiqi was also very confused. Because this old man has the complete 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. This is a rank 8 cultivation method that can be cultivated to the heaven origin realm. Rank 8 cultivation method. Even with Lung Shiqi's strong will, he could not help but be moved. One had to know that the Blood Slaughter 7 Fiend art he cultivated was only a rank 7 cultivation method. Although he also had the 5 God Flowing Light art and the 1,000 Reincarnation Illusory World art, these two cultivation methods might not be lower than rank 8. However, these two cultivation methods were not complete. The 5 God Flowing Light art needed to break through a large realm to obtain the next level of the cultivation method. As for the next level of the 1,000 Reincarnation Illusory World art, it was also in Ozu's mind. Therefore, a complete rank 8 cultivation method was indeed very attractive to Lung Shiqi. However, Lung Shiqi still had a trace of doubt. Is Senior speaking the truth? Tu Deng said, Of course, this old man never lies because the 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique was created by me. The reason why Sang Hetong did not kill me was because he wanted to obtain the last level of the 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique for me. This old man also cultivated the 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique and the metal-type cultivation method, so I could sense little friend's aura. Hiss! When Lung Shiqi heard this, he could not help but secretly gasp. Tu Deng was actually the creator of the 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique. This was a person who could create a rank 8 cultivation method. Just now, when Tu Deng said that he had created the metal-type cultivation method and the secret method to separate consciousness, Lung Shiqi was only slightly surprised, but now, his heart was truly shaken. Lung Shiqi immediately said in a clear voice, This junior will definitely help Senior Tu Deng escape. Good. Tu Deng nodded and said, This old man will teach you the method to control the teleportation formation. Tu Deng stretched out his hand, and a wisp of golden light entered Lung Shiqi's forehead. Immediately, 2 sets of chants appeared in Lung Shiqi's mind. One set was naturally the chance to control the teleportation formation, while the other was the secret method to wipe out evil thoughts. This secret method was called the Void Annihilation Divine Blade, specialized in cutting all kinds of illusory spiritual bodies, primordial spirits, souls, and thoughts. Seeing this Void Annihilation Divine Blade, Lung Shiqi's eyes kept flickering. Perhaps he would also need this secret method in the near future. At this moment, in his opinion, the Void Annihilation Divine Blade was even more important than the complete 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique. Lung Shiqi said, Senior, please wait for a moment. This junior needs to practice this technique first. Tu Deng smiled kindly. No problem. The method to control the teleportation formation is a bit complicated, and this old man has been trapped here for decades. A little while won't make a difference, little friend. You can slowly learn it. Then, Lung Shiqi didn't say anything and directly sat down cross-legged. He used his unlimited skill points to instantly learn the teleportation formation method. However, he didn't use his skill points to learn the Void Annihilation Divine Blade. Instead, he relied on his own ability to learn this secret method. This was because if he used his unlimited skill points, it was equivalent to borrowing the power of the system. This Void Annihilation Divine Blade was one of his trump cards against the system in the future, of course. He had to learn it himself. After nearly a day, Lung Shiqi finally completely understood the Void Annihilation Divine Blade. He opened his eyes and said, "Senior, we can begin." Chapter 366. Tu Deng was surprised to see Lung Shiqi comprehending 2 spells in half a day. At this time, the evil thought ran out and said, "Just a mere teleportation formation spell. You took so long to learn it. Truly stupid." Lung Shiqi coughed dryly. He put on an act and said with an awkward tone, "Junior's aptitude is slow. I have embarrassed myself in front of Senior." Tu Deng's good thoughts said, "Then let's begin." Lung Shiqi silently retreated until he was dozens of feet away. Next, golden and green runes appeared on Tu Deng's body. These runes quickly crawled onto the chains that were trapping him. Soon after, the chains began to shake rapidly, making ding-ding-dang-dang-dang sounds. Not only that, but patterns that resembled goo worms also appeared on the chains. Lung Shiqi squinted. He could see that Tu Deng's strength was much stronger than the chains. It was only a matter of time before Tu Deng broke free. However, just as Tu Deng broke free of the chains, ripples suddenly appeared on the golden lake beneath their feet. Countless buzzing sounds came from below the lake. It seemed like something was coming out. Tu Deng suddenly shouted, "Not good. The golden silk goo is more sensitive than before. Little friend Lu, this old man still needs at least half an incense stick's worth of time to succeed. You must hold on." Lung Shiqi's eyes twitched. Tu Deng said he only needed to hold on for a few breaths of time, but now it was extended to 15 minutes. Although those golden silk goo had not completely come out, Lung Shiqi could feel the terrifying aura of goo worms surrounding him. Lung Shiqi was anxious, but he did not panic. He said, "Senior, this is not the price we agreed on. Give me the method to cultivate and remove mind-controlling goo." Tu Deng did not expect Lung Shiqi to still have the mind to bargain at this time. But since Lung Shiqi dared to say this, it meant he had some confidence. Tu Deng immediately agreed. Next, Lung Shiqi activated the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique with all his might, his body emitting traces of green light. All of the golden silk goo were attracted by the aura of the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique and surged towards Lung Shiqi like waves. Even Lung Shiqi felt his scalp turning numb when he saw these countless golden silk goo. Soon after, he changed his cultivation method and, at the same time, circulated the golden mystic yang art. The light on his body also became a mixture of gold and green like Tu Deng's. Lung Shiqi raised his palms to the sky. Dense golden light gathered, and a golden sun appeared in this space. Bright sun mystic yang palm. However, Lung Shiqi did not strike out with his palm. Instead, he kept it in his hand. Countless golden thread goo wriggled over, but before they could even get close, they were turned into ashes by the golden radiance. However, Lung Shiqi was also using the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique, constantly attracting the golden silk goo. They were like moths flying into a flame, one after another, but in the end, they all disappeared from the world. When Tu Deng saw this scene, he was slightly surprised. With his experience, he could see that Lung Shiqi had already cultivated the glorious sun mystic yang palm to the great perfection stage. That was why he was able to store it and not release it, and it didn't consume too much spiritual energy. Soon after, his expression became relaxed. Lung Shiqi's state attracted almost all of the golden thread goo, and as long as he had enough spirit energy, not to mention half an incense's time, he could even hold on for an hour. He could not help but think, I underestimated him. Thus, Tooting's good and evil thoughts began to break free from the shackles of the chains. Time passed quickly, but it also passed slowly, because Lung Shiqi was consuming large amounts of spirit energy at every moment. Although he had cultivated the glorious sun, mystic yang palm, to perfection, it was still a rank 5 spirit technique. With his current cultivation, using it for a long time was still a bit taxing. At this moment, his forehead was already covered in sweat. Fortunately, he also heard a bang sound. Following that, several similar sounds were heard. Lung Shiqi knew that Tooting had succeeded. Sure enough, Tooting raised his arms and rose from the ground. His whole body emitted a soaring aura. What was even more shocking was that his figure actually stopped in midair and did not descend. Standing in the air, Lung Shiqi's eyes narrowed. This was clearly an ability that only a Sky Yuan realm expert could have, but Tooting could actually do it. Tooting said to Lung Shiqi, "Little friend Lu, it's done. I'll send you to the outside world now." Wait. Lung Shiqi shook his head. Then he stopped using the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique and put away the glorious sun, mystic yang palm. Instantly, countless golden silk goo rushed over. Lung Shiqi's expression did not change. He stretched out his hand and took the initiative to absorb hundreds of golden silk goo into his body. When he had just arrived here, most of the goo worms that he had painstakingly selected from the goo worm cave were killed by Tooting's evil thoughts. Now, he could replenish them. Moreover, although this golden silk goo was very weak and could be restrained by metal attribute cultivation methods, it could also restrain the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique. He was now involved in the conspiracy of the goo god sect's leader, Sang Hitong. He might encounter people who cultivated this technique in the future. At that time, this golden silk goo would be one of his trump cards. Tooting did not say anything. After Lung Shiqi collected enough golden silk goo, Tooting's hands continuously formed seals on Lung Shiqi's body. Little friend Lu needs to teleport me out as soon as possible. Otherwise, when a golden silk goo finds me, I will die. Lung Shiqi nodded silently. Then, he felt the world spinning and returned to the outside world. When Lung Shiqi went out, he found that he had already left the Goo God Peak. But he was not too far away because the Goo God Peak was still in his vision. It was estimated to be about 10 miles away. Looking at the sky, it should be the afternoon of the second day. At this time, Lung Shiqi was not in a hurry to teleport Tooting out. Instead, he used his fastest speed to set up a lightning destruction formation and hundreds of golden silk goo. He could not fully believe Tooting's words. Now that he had returned to the outside world, the system map could be used normally. He could also activate the Destiny skill. If Tooting kept his word and gave him the cultivation method, it would be fine. But if Tooting wanted to kill him, the lightning destruction formation and golden silk goo could buy him some time. As long as he could hold on for a breath's time, he could teleport away. After he arranged everything, his hands started to form seals. Then, a small formation appeared in front of him. Following that, Tooting's figure appeared. As soon as he came out, Shan Yin winked at Lung Shiqi. Chapter 367. The moment Tu Deng appeared, the evil intention's eyes flashed with green light. He stared at Lung Shiqi with killing intent. Meanwhile, Tu Deng Shan's eyes suddenly released golden light. He shot out a golden light that enveloped an area of 10 zhong. He shouted, "Little friend Lu, quickly!" Lung Shiqi did not hesitate. His mental power surged out, directly invading Tu Deng's mental space. Logically speaking, with Lung Shiqi's cultivation and mental power strength, he should not be able to invade the mental space of a unity of Heaven Realm. However, Tu Dang Shan's mind emptied and allowed Lung Shiqi in. And in Tu Dang's mental space, there were two figures facing each other. One of them was filled with negative emotions such as resentment, anger, and revenge. The other was suffused with a faint golden light, giving people the feeling of being bathed in spring breeze. These two figures were Tu Dang's evil intention and good intention. Tu Dang's evil intention roared malevolently. What is the meaning of this? It is impossible to get rid of me. You and I are equal in strength. Neither of us can do anything to the other. Quickly let me kill that brat. It has been too long since I tasted meat. I am too hungry. Tu Dang Shan's evil intention sighed deeply. This is the old me from back then, being trapped for a few decades. Perhaps it is heaven's punishment for me. I should be punished. You are right, I will not kill you, but there is someone else who can. The moment he finished, Lung Shiqi's figure appeared between the two of them. Tu Dang's evil intention's expression changed. He said crazily, You actually emptied your mind. Do you want to die? No, the one who should die is you, AI. It is not that this old man cannot kill you. It is that I cannot do it. You are a part of me. Even if you are filled with evil, you still have your own consciousness. This old man has already decided not to kill anyone, so I will have to trouble little friend Lu to do it. Huh? The evil intention laughed wildly. Hypocrite to the extreme. Did you not kill many people back then? In order to make the Gu God sect the national religion of Zhu Lu country, you have personally massacred several sects. Now you are showing fake mercy. Disgusting. Besides, even if this sect master was standing here, this brat wouldn't be able to kill me. The good spirit suddenly formed a spiritual seal with one hand, and a stream of light instantly connected him and the evil spirit together. The evil spirit's body stiffened, and it couldn't move. No matter how he struggled, he maintained the same posture as kindness. Goodness closed its eyes, as if it did not want to see the end of evil spirit. Lung Shiqi walked in front of the evil spirit. The evil spirit couldn't move now, but still smiled at Lung Shiqi and said, Ignorant boy, you can't kill me. When I get out, I will eat you alive. Lung Shiqi didn't say anything. He used his palm as a knife and gently swung it down. He didn't see him wave anything, but a black line as thin as a hair suddenly appeared in the space between him and the evil spirit. The black line continued to extend until it reached the back of the evil spirit. What was even more strange was that the space near the evil spirit was actually separated. Like a mirror that was split in half, the upper half and the lower half staggered, and the person in the mirror was also split in half. The evil spirit was easily split in half. This was the Void Destruction Divine Blade. The evil spirit's grin instantly froze, and then his figure began to dissipate. His face was full of endless resentment. He opened his mouth wide, but he couldn't make a sound, and finally completely dissipated. Lung Shiqi was also a bit stunned. He also couldn't believe that he killed the evil spirit so easily. At the same time, he also had greater expectations for the Void Destruction Divine Blade. Goodness opened his eyes, but at this time his eyes were full of sadness and a bit of regret. He said weakly, Little friend Lu, you can go out first. Lung Shiqi nodded, and then he withdrew his spirit power, and his consciousness returned to his body. And he unexpectedly found that Tu Dang's aura was rapidly falling. Even the realm of unity of heaven and man was a bit unstable. Senior, this is? Tu Dang waved his hand and said, The evil spirit is a part of me. Cutting off the evil spirit is equivalent to cutting off a part of my cultivation. But since it can solve a big problem and prevent people from dying, a mere cultivation is nothing. Hearing Tu Dang's words, Lung Shiqi felt a bit strange. It wasn't that Tu Dang was strange, but that Tu Dang gave him a familiar feeling. This feeling was like those senior monks in his previous life. Thinking of this, Lung Shiqi's heart moved. He immediately remembered that there were hundreds of Buddhist scriptures in his mustard seed bracelet. These Buddhist scriptures were very compatible with Tu Dang, causing a different kind of thought to emerge in his mind. Lung Shichi cupped his hands and asked, Senior, since you have escaped, do you want to get rid of Sang and Tong and take back the Gu God sect? If Tu Deng really had this idea, Lung Shichi felt that they could work together to deal with Sang and Tong. If Tu Deng didn't have this idea, then it would confirm Lung Shichi's thought. Tu Deng sighed slightly and said, This old man's hatred for Sang and Tong has dissipated along with the evil spirit. Moreover, the Gu God sect is just a worldly possession. This old man only wants to wander the world and do good deeds to make up for the sins this old man has committed in the past. Hearing this, Lung Shichi felt that Tu Deng really had the demeanor of a senior monk. Thus, he took out the first part of the Vajra Prajnaparamita Sutra and gave it to Tu Deng. Tu Deng took it with a slightly puzzled expression. He didn't know why Lung Shichi did this, but when he casually flipped to a page, his eyes suddenly focused as if he was attracted by the contents. As Tu Deng watched, he gradually became immersed. Lung Shichi's eyes revealed a look of interest. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back and waited quietly at the side. Next, there was only the sound of the book being flipped. There wasn't much content in this Buddhist sutra, but Tu Deng read it very carefully. It took him a long time to finish reading. But to Lung Shichi's surprise, Tu Deng actually started reading again. After repeating this several times, just when Lung Shichi was a little impatient, Tu Deng finally raised his head. At this moment, his eyes were full of excitement. He said in surprise, This book can be called a divine book. This old man has never heard of it before. But this old man faintly feels that this is the direction this old man is pursuing. Little friend Liu, where did you get this divine book? Do you have anything else? Lung Shichi didn't answer, but changed the topic and said, Senior Tu Deng, let's not talk about this book for now. Shouldn't we complete the last part of the deal? Of course, he was referring to the complete 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique, as well as the method to refine and remove the mind control Gu. Tu Deng patted his head without caring about his image and said, This old man was confused. Little friend, please don't resist. Saying so, he pointed a finger and a golden light entered between Lung Shichi's eyebrows like last time. He directly sent the things he agreed to into Lung Shichi's mind. Lung Shichi accepted this information and smiled in satisfaction. Meeting Tu Deng was an accident, but his harvest was also not bad. Little friend, this old man knows that you must have the follow-up to the Vajra Prajnaparamita Sutra. Although this book isn't a cultivation method or spirit technique, this old man likes it. How about this? This old man will make another deal with you. Lung Shichi smiled, of course. Chapter 368. Lung Shichi and Tu Deng quickly came to an agreement. Lung Shichi also got what he wanted, so he gave the complete set of Vajra Prajnaparamita Sutra to Tu Deng. This Buddhist sutra was completely useless in his hands, so if he could exchange it for some benefits, he could be considered to have profited greatly. As for Tu Deng, it was as if he had obtained a treasure. He directly ignored Lung Shichi and immersed himself in the world of the scriptures. As for Lung Shichi, he felt a little awkward. He coughed dryly and said, Then this junior will take his leave. Tu Deng waved his hand, and a door opened in the golden light that enveloped them. Lung Shichi's eyes flashed. He took back the golden silk Gu that was hidden underground and left. During this process, Tu Deng didn't even raise his head. After walking out of the light, Lung Shichi turned around. Where was the golden light behind him? It was only a ball of air. Lung Shichi immediately used ghostly spring steps to leave this place. Then, he used the destiny skill to teleport back to the Imperial City. He was quite satisfied with this trip to Gushan Peak. First of all, he collected many Gu worms with different abilities. Although Tu Deng's matter was an accident, the result was that he earned a rank 8 cultivation method. This complete 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique was very profound, but it wasn't very compatible with Lung Shichi. Thus, he didn't plan to cultivate it as his main cultivation method. The only pity was that he didn't get any valuable information. Lung Shiqi immediately used the destiny skill. The system map was infinitely enlarged, and the entire Imperial City and Gushin Peak were within his teleportation range. Just as he was about to teleport back to the Imperial City, a familiar yet unfamiliar figure appeared. That was Mo Huaishou, or rather, Princess Carol. Lung Shiqi continued to enlarge the system map. He found that Mo Huaishou wasn't wearing that strange mask. He could even clearly see that Mo Huaishou's beautiful face had some anxiety as she rushed towards Gushin Peak. After he found out that Mo Huaishou was the princess of Zhu Lu country, he specially wanted to find out more about the princess. Mo Huaishou, or rather, Princess Carol, was the only child of the king and Fei Wang. The current king did not have any sons in his life. He only had this one daughter, which could be considered a miracle. Thus, the king and his wife had always doted on Princess Carol. Since she was interested in the art of Gu, they had Imperial Preceptor Sang Hitong take her in as a disciple and teach her the supreme art of Gu. She loved to travel, so he spent a large amount of resources to create a mysterious mask for her that could change her appearance, allowing her to walk freely in the Thunderblaze dynasty. It could be said that he was doted on by thousands of people. However, now that the king had died suddenly, and the princess consort had intervened in the battle for the throne, she was in a precarious situation, and her position as a princess was about to come to an end. Lung Shiqi found it strange that yesterday, Yu Ruifeng and the others entered the palace to investigate the king's death. Today, Princess Carol rushed to Gu God Peak in a hurry. Could there be a connection between the two? Then, Lung Shiqi's eyes turned, and his body was teleported to the path that Mo Huaishou had to pass through. After landing on the ground, he took off his mask. Crackling sounds could be heard from his body, and his body became even thinner. He put on the human skin mask of Zhuoqiu and began to wait for Mo Huaishou's arrival. Not long after, Princess Carol galloped over on a divine spirit horse. However, she suddenly pulled on the reins. Whoa! The horse raised its two hooves and paused in midair for a few seconds before landing. Princess Carol's blue eyes were filled with vigilance. Her clear voice rang out, "Who's sneaking around? Ha ha! I didn't expect Princess Carol to be so vigilant. I admire you." A figure emerged from the ground in front of Princess Carol. It was Lung Shiqi in disguise. Princess Carol's face darkened when she saw Lung Shiqi's appearance. Lung Shiqi's current appearance was Zhuoqiu. Although it wasn't his original appearance, she could tell that he wasn't from Zhu Lu country at a glance. When Princess Carol saw that Lung Shiqi's cultivation was only at the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm, her eyes flashed with disdain. However, she didn't lower her vigilance. This was because she had met 3 Spirit Pulse realm cultivators who could fight against Spirit Aperture realm cultivators in the West Desolate Province's Mistchi City. However, she had important matters to attend to and didn't want to delay. She said coldly, "I don't care who you are or why you're waiting for me here. I only have one thing to say. If you don't move, you'll die." However, Lung Shiqi turned a deaf ear to her words and still stood there without moving. Princess Carol's eyes shot out waves of killing intent. She pointed her fingers, and rays of green light intertwined to form a giant net that attacked. Lung Shiqi formed a seal with one hand, and his entire body emitted a dense underworld cold aura. It formed a 3-meter-tall, strange handprint that brazenly fell down. This was a rank 5 spiritual skill from the Cold Underworld Treasure Manual, Cold Underworld Giant Handprint. The Cold Underworld Giant Handprint brought with it a boundless cold aura. In 2 breaths of time, it shattered Princess Carol's green net and continued to press forward. Lung Shiqi had opened up a few more spirit veins compared to the last time they fought outside Mistchi City. In addition, he cultivated the Cold Underworld Treasure Manual, a rank 5 cultivation technique. His spirit energy was even denser than before. In terms of strength, he wasn't inferior to a Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator. Princess Carol's expression finally changed. She had never expected the cold underworld giant handprint to be so powerful. What she didn't expect was that she would meet a spirit pulse realm cultivator whose strength was comparable to a spirit aperture realm cultivator today. Princess Carol stepped on the stirrups, and her figure soared into the sky like a white crane. Suddenly, hundreds of goo worms appeared behind her and formed a pair of flesh wings. She paused in the air for a few breaths of time, causing Lung Shichi's cold underworld giant handprint to only hit the spirit horse. The spirit horse's corpse was instantly frozen, but this ice was grayish-black and was still constantly devouring the spirit horse's corpse. In the blink of an eye, only bones were left of the spirit horse. What a vicious cultivation technique! Princess Carol's eyes became more dignified. She had to re-examine the person who stopped her. Lung Shichi was also a little surprised when he saw the pair of wings on Princess Carol's back. He remembered that she didn't have such a technique the last time they met outside the Mist-Chi city. It seemed like she had just cultivated it recently. Lung Shichi changed his voice and said, "Princess Carol's temper is so irritable. You've lost your dignity as a princess." Princess Carol frowned. She wasn't in King City for many years. Even if she did appear, she rarely showed her true face. It could be said that there were very few people who knew her true identity. However, Lung Shichi had revealed her identity. How could she not be shocked? "Who are you? Why did you stop me?" she asked with a heavy tone. Lung Shichi smiled. "I am Zhuo Qiuyu. I came here while traveling. I suddenly heard that His Majesty the King had passed away, so I came here to save Her Highness the Princess." "Save me? What a joke. Of course, I can also harm the princess." "Oh no. I should say the great thief Don Hui Shou." When Lung Shichi said this, Princess Carol turned pale with fright. Isn't this helping Her Highness? Princess Carol finally understood. It turned out that this person was here to get something without risking anything. She gritted her teeth and said hatefully, "What do you want, Your Excellency? Please tell me directly. Your Highness is truly intelligent, to be able to see through my thoughts in an instant. I'm impressed." Lung Shichi smiled. "I'm just curious about the goo worms on Your Highness." Goo worm? Princess Carol was dazed at first, but then her expression turned gloomy. For people who cultivated goo techniques, goo worms were their second lives. If they nurtured a powerful goo worm suitable for themselves, their battle strength would increase greatly. Similarly, if they lost their goo worms, their battle strength would decrease greatly. Thus, people who cultivated goo techniques placed great importance on their goo worms. This was like a sword cultivator's sword. They couldn't allow others to covet it. At the same time, she had some doubts. Although she had only fought with Lung Shichi once, she could sense that Lung Shichi cultivated a cold cultivation method. Then what did he need goo worms for? Thus, she asked, "Your Excellency doesn't cultivate goo techniques. What do you need goo worms for?" Lung Shichi wasn't willing to answer and said coldly, "Your Highness, you only need to answer whether I agree or not." You. Princess Carol had never suffered such humiliation before. She was about to speak when Lung Shichi spoke first. "I only want 10 spirit-devouring goo worms, and those goo worms that can turn into wings. With these, I can guarantee that I will immediately leave Zhu Lu country, and the news of you being Immo Hui Shou will be kept forever." "What did you say?" Princess Carol spat out these words one by one. Not to mention how precious those spirit-devouring goo were and how hard it was for her to nurture them. There was also that goo worm that could turn into wings. It was the soaring sky goo that the princess had spent a large amount of resources to exchange for. She had only used it once. How could she give it to someone else? Moreover, even if she gave it to him, how could she be sure that he wasn't lying to her? At this time, Lung Shichi saw that she was deep in thought and continued, "I have to remind Your Highness that you don't have much time." Hearing this, Princess Carol clenched her fists tightly. She knew that her time was precious. She had already been delayed for a while, and her spirit horse had died. If she didn't hurry to Gushan Peak now, her mother would really be in danger. Suddenly, she realized that she seemed to have experienced this situation before. She recalled that she had also met a mysterious person outside Lanchi City who was also at the late stage of Spirit Vein Realm. He had also used information to threaten her. Princess Carol couldn't help but show some suspicion. Were there too many mysterious people in this world, or was she so unlucky to always meet such people? Or could it be that there was no connection between the two of them? She didn't forget that she had once handed over the 10,000 spirit-devouring goo technique in Lanchi City. Now, someone was asking for goo worms from her. This was too much of a coincidence. However, these two people's cultivation methods were completely different. They were even polar opposites, so it was impossible for them to be the same person. Lung Shiqi saw the suspicion in Princess Carol's eyes, and his heart tightened. He was afraid that she would guess something. So he coldly snorted and said, "Princess Carol, Your Highness, you still need to think carefully. It seems that Your Highness still needs to consider it slowly. Then I'll go to the post house in King City. I believe that the Dark Thunder Guards should be more generous." Princess Carol instantly collected all her thoughts. She looked slightly flustered and hurriedly shouted, "Wait, I can agree to your conditions, but how can you guarantee that you won't leak it out?" This one has always been a man of his word. Or rather, everyone in our organization is a man of his word. I think Your Highness should have experienced it in Lanchi City. Lung Shiqi was full of nonsense and forced himself to come up with an organization. Princess Carol was shocked. He really is in cahoots with the person who stopped me in Lanchi City. However, she believed it because after the last transaction, she had indeed successfully escaped from the Western Desolate Province. After hesitating for a while, she said, "I can give you goo worms, but I have a condition." Chapter 370. The reason why Lung Shiqi came up with this organization was actually a little helpless, because he was always pulling wool from sheep. And just now, Princess Carol had already begun to suspect him. So he simply made up an organization, which could not only cover up the lie, but also make Princess Carol feel more at ease giving him the goo worms. Hearing that Princess Carol still had conditions, he pretended to be displeased and said, "Let's hear it. Your Excellency wants to get the spirit-devouring goo and the soaring sky goo with just one mouth. The value of each of these goo worms is no less than a 5th-tier spirit weapon. Shouldn't Your Excellency take out something?" Lung Shiqi said coldly, "Your Highness, are you bargaining? On the other hand, I can slowly negotiate with Your Highness for an entire day without any problems. However, Your Highness doesn't seem to have so much time." This time, Princess Kaluo smiled and said, "I knew you would say that. My condition is very simple. Right now, most of the experts in the Goo God Peak are not here. At most, there are a few Spirit Aperture Realm Spirit cultivators guarding it. Your Excellency only needs to help me lure those people out. Of course, the more people you lure out, the better. As long as Your Excellency agrees, I can give you the Spirit-Devouring Goo and the Soaring Sky Goo now. After the matter is done, I can also give you a Mind Control Goo." Hearing this, Lung Shiqi was really moved. He had personally experienced the power of the Mind Control Goo, so he naturally thought of it. And he also guessed that Princess Carol probably wanted to sneak into the Goo God Peak to get something, but he couldn't easily believe her. "Princess Carol has the Mind Control Goo? Not now, but when Your Excellency leads away the spirit cultivators on the Goo God Peak, there will be..." Princess Carol chuckled. "With my insignificant cultivation base, how can I hold back several Spirit Aperture Realm experts? Your Highness, you must be joking. Your Excellency comes and goes like a ghost. I don't think this matter will be difficult for Your Excellency. Moreover, Your Excellency knows what the Mind Control Goo is. As long as you can lure away the experts of the Goo God Peak for a period of time, you'll be able to get it. You will make a lot of money." Lung Shiqi pondered for a moment. He calculated that he wouldn't lose anything in this deal. Moreover, it wouldn't be troublesome to lure those experts away. He nodded and said, "Deal." Next, Princess Ka Luo straightforwardly took out 10 spirit devouring goo and over 100 soaring sky goo, saying, "I believe you are a man of your words. Let's go to Gushun Peak now. To be able to travel together with your highness is the blessing of 3 lifetimes. Unfortunately, I am used to traveling alone, so it is better for us to go our separate ways. Your highness only needs to hide near Gushun Peak and wait for the right time." Okay, after the matter is done, let's meet at the pool 10 miles west of the Goo God Peak. After saying that, Princess Carol's spiritual power surged, and she quickly left. Lung Shichi looked at Princess Carol's back. After a while, he rushed to the Goo God Peak from another direction. This place was not very far from the Goo God Peak, less than 20 miles away. Lung Shichi used the Ghost Spring steps and soon arrived near the mountain gate. He used the white eye to avoid Princess Carol and knew that she was quietly hiding in the dark. Lung Shichi quietly entered the Goo God Peak again, preparing to lure out the experts. But he didn't know that after Princess Carol quietly waited for a while, she sneered and then left at an even faster speed. After Lung Shichi entered the Goo God Peak, he used the white eye and quickly found a person's aura. That person was Zhao Ying, and this person was the key to Lung Shichi luring out the experts of the Goo God Peak. At this moment, Zhao Ying had just walked out of palace. This was the place where the sound transmission formation was set up. He used the sound transmission formation to inform the King City branch about the strange disciple that he encountered. The higher-ups of the Goo God sect were in the King City. He believed that there would be a result soon. However, at this moment, an evil ghost figure floated away. Zhao Ying's expression changed slightly. He was about to chase after it, but he stopped in an instant. He thought to himself, still want to play this trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. However, after hesitating for a moment, he still chased after it. After about half an incense stick's time, a person wearing a chaotic mask appeared. He quickly walked to the hall where the sound transmission formation was placed. However, when he reached the door, a sudden change occurred. A dense group of goo worms suddenly drilled out from the ground. They gathered together to form a human figure. Then, with a flash of light, a person suddenly appeared. It was Zhao Ying, who was supposed to leave. As soon as he appeared, he laughed sinisterly. There's a way to heaven, but you don't walk. There is no door to hell, but you break in. You have already run away, but you still dare to come back and cause trouble. Let me beat you up and see what kind of trash you are." Lung Shichi immediately put on a shocked posture. Why are you here? You dare to attack me? Do you know who I am? Sneaky. Even if your identity is extraordinary, I'm still performing the duties of the sect. I am reasonable no matter what you say. After Zhao Ying finished speaking, he waved his hand. The goo worms flew up and formed a small insect cloud that spread out. Lung Shichi immediately rose up from under his feet. His figure quickly rushed back. At the same time, he surged out a strange rhythm from his mouth, causing the insect cloud to pause and stay in the air. Do you think I will use this method if I know you can control the goo magic sound? Explode. Zhao Ying shouted explosively, and then the cloud of insects that covered the sky suddenly exploded apart. Rolling colorful lights burst out, accompanied by an earth-shaking loud sound, resounding throughout the entire Goo God Peak. Buzz! Lung Shichi formed a fist seal with his hands. Golden light flowed around his body and condensed into a huge golden seal in front of him, blocking the power of the explosion for him. This was another level 5 spiritual skill attached to the ultimate gold mystic yang skill, the ultimate gold breaking mountain seal. This was a spiritual skill that had both offensive and defensive capabilities. However, this ultimate gold breaking mountain seal could not completely block the power of the explosion. Lung Shichi could only retreat and erect an ice wall around his body to be safe. Zhao Ying saw that such a powerful explosion did not injure Lung Shichi, a spirit pulse realm cultivator, and his face was a little embarrassed. He roared. You are not using the 10,000 goose spirit devouring technique at all. You are indeed a spy. Lung Shiqi ignored him and turned to run. Zhao Ying shouted fiercely. Run? Such a big movement has attracted all the disciples in the Goo God Peak. Let's see if you can still go to heaven or earth. He was right. The moment the insect cloud exploded, all the disciples of the Goo God sect rushed over, including 3 Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators and more than 10 Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators. There were also hundreds of disciples below the 4th level of Sky, Human Realm. However, Lung Shiqi was secretly smiling. This was the result he wanted. Zhao Ying's actions had saved him a lot of effort. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.